Hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight the good stuff cometh at unawares and beyond hope.
Oh, West Duhal, my friends. I'm Shawn Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, J.R.R. to my Airmare, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Shawn. Well, after once again spending way more time on a topic than we said we would, I refer, of course, to our 2 episodes and 4 combined hours on Tuor and the Fall of Gondolin, we're back tonight with a single episode chapter, which we'll still probably spend too much time on. It's chapter 24 of the Voyage of Eärendil and the War of Wrath.
Well, certainly if I have anything to do with it, we'll spend too much time on it. Yes, and as much as I wanted to ask you to take the week off for this, Alan, so I could solo this one.
Ooh, a vacation.
Yeah, no, I'm kidding. I couldn't do that. I couldn't let you have a vacation. Truly, actually, more than ever, I'm really looking forward to some great discussion with this one. As I'm sure everyone but maybe 2 of our listeners knows, this is my favorite story in the Silmarillion, so I'm very excited.
Yeah, and I know you want to get on with it as quickly as possible, Shawn, but we owe it to our listeners to dig into Bartleman's bag. We've got to delay things, don't we?
Yeah,
so what do we have in the bag?
But please forgive me if I pick a couple of short ones tonight. So
not a problem. I think that's understood.
We can get to the story quickly. I've actually got 2 here from Donna in Indiana that go nicely together and I think make a nice epilogue to our last episode. And also nicely tease The Hobbit, which I can't believe I'm saying this, will actually be starting in about 3 months.
Oh, my goodness.
Amazing, isn't it?
Time flies.
Yeah. So the first one from Donna, she said, was the mithril coat found in Smaug's hoard the small coat given to Eärendil by his mother Idril?
Ooh.
I know, right? That's a new one to me, but it's really interesting.
That sure is.
And I'll kind of explain what she means by that. But I'm going to first of all say I think she might be onto something here.
Oh, you're right. That part that I'm thinking of isn't in Unfinished Tales, is it? Anyway, we'll get to that. Sorry.
No,
I'm jumping ahead, folks. Sorry.
So let me kind of go back and kind of explain what we're talking about here. So,
yeah.
Okay. Everybody knows Bilbo gets a coat of mail from Smaug's hoard.
Right.
Going back to what the Hobbit tells us about that coat of mail, when Thorin gives it to him, it says, with that, he put on Bilbo a small coat of mail, wrought for some young elf prince long ago. It was of silver steel, which the elves call mithril, and with it went a belt of pearls and crystals. So, okay, we've got a mithril coat that comes from a young elf prince. And then the other thing Donna's thinking about is actually something that's in the Fall of Gondolin version that's in the Book of Lost Tales.
Right. That's where it is.
Yeah, so it's in that really early version, but it does say that Idril coming to Eärendil, it says, his mother coming set about him a tiny coat of mail that she had let fashion in secret.
Huh.
And that's really all we know about it, but clearly there was a baby Eärendil-sized coat of mail, or a child Eärendil-sized coat of mail, that was in Gondolin in that early version. Now,
and that would be about a 7-year-old boy, if I remember correctly, right?
That's right.
I think it was 7 years after their marriage.
That's right. Yeah. Yes, you're absolutely right. So, yeah, so he would have been about the right size for a hobbit, certainly. It's the Book of Lost Tales version, and we know, I mean, by Christopher Tolkien's own admission, we talked about this. There's so much that was changed from that Book of Lost Tales version to the later. But, maybe this was a detail that Tolkien would have kept the same. We don't know. If we had actually written the story out the way he really wanted to, maybe he would have kept it like this. Going back to the Hobbit, passage, we know that Eärendil is not just some young elf prince, right? We know he's a half-elven, but there's no reason to believe that Bilbo would have known that, certainly not at the time when he was receiving the coat.
No.
There's no reason to believe that Thorin would have known that. And, considering that Eärendil was raised in Gondolin among elves by an elf mother and an elf grandfather, just fully among elves, maybe the fact that he was actually only half-elf might, who knows? The dwarves may not have even known that when it was commissioned. So
that's true.
There's a possibility there. I'm also struck by the fact that there's a belt of pearls that goes with it. If the belt was actually originally part of the set with the mithril coat, then, the pearls might suggest that it was made for a family with some sort of connection to the sea and to Ulmo. So maybe there's some support for that. And then because it's Eärendil related, my mind just starts racing, and I start thinking, well, maybe owning this coat led Bilbo to research elf princes later in life, and maybe that's how he got so interested in Eärendil, interested enough to write a poem about him. And I know I'm just going completely crazy now.
That's off the rails, man.
That is a bit off the rails, but and honestly, I think if that had been the case, you'd think maybe that some details about the coat might have made it into his Eärendil poem. There's no pearls or crystals on his armor or anything like that. So I don't know. I'm kind of at a maybe with this one, but do you have any thoughts on it?
Well, I like the maybe. Certainly it's an intriguing thought. But one of the things you just said at the end is something that I'm thinking about. We know all about those crazy other exotic materials from Bilbo's poem about Eärendil, the ebony and the silver and the chalcedony and the adamant and the emerald.
He goes into a lot of detail, yeah.
He really does. And but there's something else in the poem that I thought about. The ship that he describes, the Vingilot that we'll get to tonight, the ship that he describes that Eärendil takes to is made of mithril and of elven glass. It's kind of like the Bugatti Veyron of ships, actually, but there are no pearls. It's made of like, the shifter costs $27,000 because it's made of titanium and it's,
Right. Yeah.
But it is an interesting speculation. I certainly like the idea of that sort of continuity. The age is right. But the only concern that I have, and I'm trying to figure out how did it get there? Mithril is found only in Moria. That's a very long way for Idril to mail order a mail. It's kind of a redundancy. Sorry,
it's a mail order.
It's a mail order. Doom.
Very well done.
Especially because she couldn't provide a shipping address. Gondolin, secret city. Oh wait, I can't even say Gondolin. Cross that out.
That is a good point. That is a good point. Yeah.
P.O. box nowhere.
Yeah.
Zip code.
even the Amazon delivery service isn't going to be able to find that.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Maybe the new drones could, but.
Maybe so.
But how would it have ended up in Smaug's hoard? That is, in Erebor, so very far away from Gondolin. Now, here's where I think I probably would have said almost certainly, is it had been found in the Troll hoard along with Glamdring. Then I'd be, okay, that had to have come from Gondolin.
Because those other swords and Sting and everything came from
Gondolin. But I honestly don't have any equally interesting speculations, so I'll stick with the maybe as well. I have to. No, there's no problem. There's no way to wrap it up one way or the other.
Yeah, it's a very cool maybe though, and I really like it. I mean, definitely, yeah. I mean, the question of how it could have ended up in Smaug's hoard is so kind of a tough one. Yeah, and I mean, if presumably he probably would have, Child Eärendil would have put it on, when he fled because he was, fleeing a war zone. So how it ended up, being taken, didn't end up in the wardrobe of one of his sons or something. I guess it. Yeah, there's some problems with it, but I do like the speculation. I think it's a really cool maybe.
Because they fled down Sirion down to where the gleanings were, and then further down to Círdan. By that point, he would have outgrown it. Maybe they, I'm sure that he just put it in like the Goodwill box in.
Sure. Yeah. The mail for tots.
The mail.
Toys for tots, but it's mail.
Yeah.
They just have a mailbox that's just sitting out there to collect.
My goodness.
I see what
I
can't wait till we get to the Hobbit. We're just going to be doing this the whole time.
The whole time, folks. Don't tell everybody that. They might not want to listen.
This is true. This is very true. No, it's a good speculation. I love it. I'm at a maybe with it. I think it's a cool thought.
I think we have to be at a maybe.
But it's actually this last question about how it ended up with Smaug is actually a good segue into the second question from Donna, which I'll go to now, and it's this. It says, "Dragons were loosed upon Gondolin, dragons from the brood of Glaurung. Could Smaug have been among them? I was just wondering if anything had been written about the history of the dragons of Middle-earth."
Well, so, let me take
Smaug
this one, Shawn. I'm going to take this one.
Please do.
Because tonight's the long-awaited Eärendil episode, and you need to save your voice.
It's the last thing you're going to get a chance to say for the next.
Well, pretty much. I'm going to check out now after this. I'll come back for the outro.
There you go.
Unfortunately, Donna,
don't do that.
I won't. No, there's really no history of the dragons written anywhere, or at least not that I could find. I mean, I did look a lot of places. Okay, I mean, I looked under the couch, I looked, in the car, but what we do have about their origins is what's in the Silmarillion, And then after the War of Wrath, they disappear again until the Third Age with Scatha, and then, boy, is that a story. And then Smaug, and of course other unnamed dragons breeding in the Withered Heath, I believe, is where that's listed.
Okay.
But coming back to Smaug, he couldn't have been at Gondolin. As we know, Smaug was a winged dragon. Glaurung was not, and I think it's safe to assume neither was his brood, because the dragons that were winged didn't show up until the War of Wrath. So these were non-winged dragons that showed up when Gondolin was sacked.
Right, that's true.
So the winged dragons show up at the War of Wrath, so maybe you're thinking, well, maybe Smaug was around then as, part of the brood of Encalagon, and somehow he dodged Eärendil and his magic ship, doing what we're going to do at the end of the chapter here. No spoilers. It's the end of the chapter.
No spoilers. Well, you should have read it already.
You should have read it, really. But and of course I can't prove that he wasn't. It's impossible to prove a negative in this case. But there's a passage from The Hobbit that really makes this seem unlikely. And it is Smaug talking, but I am going to spare you my Smaug voice because I haven't really developed him yet, and you'll have to wait until we get to The Hobbit to hear it. Okay?
So that sounds good. Yeah. I know you weren't expecting to have to get to Smaug so quickly.
No, I wasn't. I mean, really, Smaug already. I just had to tackle Ulmo, Gurthang, Glaurung. Okay, I'm done with the voices for a bit.
You need a break. You deserve a break.
Well, my bronchitis says I need a break, but Smaug says, "Revenge. The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons that dare approach me? I kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. Then I was but young and tender. Now I am old, and strong, strong, strong. Thief in the shadows," he gloated. Now here's the thing about that. He makes these comments to Bilbo, and it's 2941 of the Third Age.
Okay, that sounds right.
The then that he's referring to when he says, "Then I was but young and tender," is the sacking of Erebor, which took place, granted, not just the other day. It was 171 years ago in 2770.
Okay, yeah.
But now he's old and strong. So the thing is that this Third Age 2770, the sacking of Erebor, is more than 6,200 years after the War of Wrath. Now,
right.
I know we don't know how long dragons typically live if they're not killed in combat, but I can't imagine that in any way 6,200 years old would still be young by any creature's standards, especially if old and strong is just 171 years later.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's like that last 171 years.
Well, that extra 5%.
Oh man, those were the hard living years.
I was young when I was 62, but when I was 64, I'm old.
Sleeping on a pile of gold for 170 more years, that's when I feel old and strong.
Yeah. So I have to say it's pretty unlikely. Any thoughts from your end?
I only think about this because I read it earlier today, actually, because I'm reading The Hobbit to my son at bedtime, and there's actually a passage in there right after Bilbo steals the cup and wakes Smaug up. We get a little bit of narration that kind of reveals Smaug's thought process, and it says, "He would not forget or forgive the theft, not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone. But he could afford to wait."
Yeah. So if 1,000 years is nothing
is enough to turn him to stone, basically turn him into this, kill him, make him die. 1,000 years is presumably enough time for him to die of old age.
Right.
I would think
years.
that 6,200 is way too long for a dragon to live. So I'm right there with you.
Yep. Sorry. So that one's not a maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry, Donna. All right.
Good question though, because
really both of them were good
things
questions.
We wonder. Yeah.
And we love that stuff. So, but without any further ado, because tonight is a very special episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. It's the episode
in which Shawn learns a valuable lesson.
In which Alan learns a very valuable lesson, not to interrupt Shawn talking about Eärendil.
Yes.
Ouch. Yes. What is this thing in my chest? I'm sorry, Shawn.
Do not interrupt when I'm talking Eärendil.
So before we start, do you want to, I know you know a gazillion things about this text. Do you want to give us an intro like we have for those other big stories?
I actually would love to, and I promise not to do this with every story from now on, but this is another one where it really is important. Because with Eärendil, we are talking once again about one of the first stories Tolkien ever wrote in the Legendarium. Right. And I know it seems like I keep saying that, but it's because we're at the end of the Silmarillion, and
which Tolkien was the beginning of what he wrote.
It was just the beginning of what he wrote. He started with those later stories, and the earlier stories were written as backstory, basically, to subcreate this world that the main stories took place in. Mm-hmm. Now, I know we've kind of talked about it there being three such stories, the Fall of Gondolin, Beren and Luthien, and then the Children of Húrin. Eärendil's story really is the culmination of the Fall of Gondolin, so it's kind of part and parcel with that one.
Yeah.
And Eärendil, it goes well beyond that, which we'll get to, but and I think that's because Eärendil himself was an early creation of Tolkien's. It was basically something he was inspired, that he read about when he was a very young man, and he was inspired by, and it is probably one of those things that set him on his first steps towards his own writing.
Right.
Way back in our first episode.
Wow, that was a while ago.
I know. Yeah, 40. What is this? 43.
43
today.
Yeah, so 42 episodes ago.
Yeah.
And a year and I don't know what, about 3 months.
3 months. Yeah. 15 months. Wow. But way back in that episode, we were going through Carpenter's biography, and we talked about how in 1913, Tolkien first discovered a set of Old English poems that are called the Christ poems, mm-hmm. or Christ is Old English for Christ, mm-hmm. And obviously religious poems in nature. And there were two lines in one of these Christ poems that caught Tolkien's eye, and I'll go ahead and read them again. And I think I might actually pronounce them better this time than I did.
I can't wait. I remember this from the first one.
So the two lines that caught his eye were Ela Eärendil Engla Bertast Offer Middenjard Monum Sended.
Wow.
And that translates to, I hope I got that right, man.
I think you did. It sure sounded
my second
good.
Try at that one. Thank you very much. It translates to Hail Eärendil, brightest of angels, above the middle earth sent unto men. So there we have actually, not only the name Eärendil, but also the name Middle Earth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what this actually is a reference to, literally it's a reference to the planet Venus, the morning star. And because Venus is the morning star, it was a symbol in Old English poetry of John the Baptist. In the way that the morning star presages the dawn, the coming of the sun.
Of course.
The same, that sort of was allegorically applied to John the Baptist presaging the coming of Christ.
Yeah.
And I'll give you the rest of this in Tolkien's own words. This is actually from letter 297. He says, I was struck by the great beauty of this word, or name, entirely coherent with the normal style of Anglo-Saxon, but euphonic to a peculiar degree in that pleasing but not delectable language. To my mind, the Anglo-Saxon uses seem plainly to indicate that it was a star presaging the dawn, that is what we now call Venus, the morning star, as it may be seen shining brilliantly in the dawn, before the actual rising of the sun.
Euphonic. I love that word.
Isn't that a cool word? Yeah.
It's euphonic to a peculiar degree.
Yeah, so obviously, as much as he loved Anglo-Saxon or Old English, he knew that it's not necessarily the most sonically pleasing or
it wasn't
delectable.
Pleasing.
Right, exactly.
Welsh, on the other hand, was delectable.
Yeah, oh yeah, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce any Welsh.
Oh goodness, no. I wish I could. It's beautiful, but yeah.
Yeah. So there's this connection between Eärendil and Venus, the morning star, and John the Baptist. I probably should correct something I think I said maybe a few episodes ago. I think I said back in episode 35 when we talked about Eärendil that Tolkien was the first one to make this connection, or that Tolkien kind of, realized that there was this connection. I've actually been doing some more research since then, and I found out that actually the connection was there. Tolkien kind of figured it out among the poetry, but the connection was there. It's not like he came up with this connection.
I see.
He found something that was there.
It just was there subtly because it was in poetry.
Because it was right, exactly.
Okay.
So anyway, back to Tolkien's writing. Not long after he discovered these Christ poems, it was in 1914 that Tolkien wrote his first poem about Eärendil, which I read in that Tolkien Reading Day episode a few months ago.
And that was awesome.
Yeah, such great poems and so much fun to read.
Yeah.
And the first one of those was The Voyage of Eärendil, the Evening Star.
Right.
That's published in the Book of Lost Tales, Volume 2. It's the evening star in that poem, not the morning star. Of course, if you know anything about the planet Venus, it's
both.
It's both.
Yeah.
Just depends on what time of day it is when it appears in the sky. And I'm guessing probably he just, Tolkien in the West, things going
the West,
sailing away into the West. I think he just loved that image. So I think that's why he focused on the evening star and the sunset. But
sure.
If you would like to hear me read that poem, listeners, please go back to episode 35. I had
because
quite
I will
a bit
not
of fun
be giving
with
you
those.
the time to read it again tonight.
No.
Oh,
I've got it here just in case, but no. So, but yeah, I had a lot of fun reading that and reading a few different poems that are related to Eärendil and the character.
That was a fun episode.
It was.
It was.
I really liked your survey of the different races too. But
well,
we can digress. I'm sure we will digress more. But anyway,
it's what we
please,
do.
If you haven't listened to episode 35, please do.
Definitely worth it.
The Voyage of Eärendil, the Evening Star, as well as the last poem that Tolkien wrote, or the almost last poem that he wrote about Eärendil.
Yeah.
So anyway, he wrote that poem, The Voyage of Eärendil, the Evening Star, but it was still a standalone. He didn't have any mythology to go with it yet.
Right.
And in fact, in that episode, that Tolkien Reading Day episode, I talked about how, his friend, G.B. Smith, his childhood friend who didn't make it through the Great War, he read the poem and he liked it, but he said, "What's it about?" And Tolkien's response was, "I don't know. I'll try to find out." And
classic Tolkien.
It seems to me that in trying to find out, Tolkien created an entire mythology.
Yeah. Well, to answer your question, I need to write for about 60 years and
right. Yeah, exactly.
create an entire world.
Yeah,
Amazing.
Exactly.
Just
amazing that and obviously that's a simplification, but certainly to some degree, a lot of this whole mythology in some part, owes its origin.
It owes its existence to Eärendil. Yeah.
Yeah. Being Tolkien, though, he couldn't just take this character that he discovered in an Anglo-Saxon poem and insert it into a new mythology. No,
which is interesting because he did that with the dwarf names. But
that is true.
But I digress.
Yeah, that's true. But he actually had to reinvent the name into something that was consistent with his languages. Yeah. And so I'll go back to letter 297 where he says, "But the name could not be adopted just like that. It had to be accommodated to the Elvish linguistic situation at the same time as a place for this person was made in legend." So basically what he's saying there is that, I'll take this character and I got to make a place for him in my mythology, but I also need to make a meaning for this name. So Eärendil has its own, being a real word in Old English, it has an etymology, which I won't go into here. It seems kind of foggy anyway. But he created a new Elvish etymology for it, which derives it from Eärr, meaning sea, and Endil, which means to love or be devoted to. And so his name means lover of the sea.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And we saw, Tuor, obviously, his father had so much love for the sea. He had a relationship with Ulmo.
Right.
And he transferred that love for the sea to his son, both in his name and then also in reality. When the last chapter we read about the song his father sings for him in Nantathrin, and he sings this song that awakens Eärendil's love for the sea. And then, of course, we saw at the end of that chapter, Tuor and Idril sailed away and they never returned. And both of these things left Eärendil with just this profound call towards the sea and this longing for the sea. And that's kind of what starts him on his journey. And I guess we'll see that in just a minute with the first passage that we're going to get to.
Absolutely. That's an awesome introduction to this story. And thanks for sharing that history. And now we're going to get to exactly that profound sea longing right here. So we're going to start with the very first paragraph, and then we'll start discussing. Bright Eärendil was then lord of the people that dwelt nigh to Sirion's mouths. And he took to wife Elwing the fair, and she bore to him Elrond and Elros, who are called the half-elven. Yet Eärendil could not rest, and his voyages about the shores of the hitherlands eased not his unquiet. Two purposes grew in his heart, blended as one in longing for the wide sea. He sought to sail thereon, seeking after Tuor and Idril who returned not, and he thought to find perhaps the last shore, and bring ere he died the message of elves and men to the Valar in the west, that should move their hearts to pity for the sorrows of Middle-earth. So definitely, that sea longing, and it's blended with those two purposes. I love that.
Yeah. He's not just to seek for his parents, but also, this other purpose of wanting to fulfill this errand.
I actually thinking almost the other way around. Like there's this grand purpose of this errand, of bringing the message. But I love that very personal nature too. You know, here he is. He's wanting to find his mom and dad.
Yeah.
You know, he's missing them.
That's true. That's. I mean, yeah. I guess I went in the opposite direction. But you're right. I mean, I think that
they're both amazing purposes.
but you're right. I mean, because it's such a brief character sketch. Unfortunately,
very
you know,
brief, yeah.
we only get a few pages of this character in the Silmarillion, and yeah, it's easy to, you know, you kind of gravitate towards the big purpose,
right.
You know, the role he plays in the mythology.
Yeah,
as
that's the
opposed
hero
to,
quest. You know, this is the
right.
big story.
Right,
but there's
you're
something
right.
very
you know,
human about that.
Something very human about this, just missing his folks. You know,
there's a poignancy to it that's really that kind of stuck out to me, and that maybe hadn't on previous readings. So
yeah,
but before
I wonder if that's well, and I wonder if that's one of the things that separates. You know, we've seen things about we've seen characters restless before. We've seen characters, you know, unquiet, and I wonder if, you know, this if the motivation for his unrest is partly what separates him from, you know, the fate of, I don't know, somebody like a Feanor, or, you know, somebody else who's got a worse fate.
I was thinking of Turgon's sister, Eärendil. You know, she was
Eärendil,
restless in Gondolin, and then she was restless again. I mean, you know, she just didn't, you know, couldn't stay put. And neither can Eärendil, but the motivation, you're right, the motivation is different. And here it's, you know, a noble, big time noble motivation, right? And then also that really very human motivation, very loving, very natural, you know, motivation.
Yeah.
So before
we get, I was going to say let's talk about these parents.
I was going to say I really wanted to dive into this genealogy a little bit. I spent a little bit of time putting this together before we move on to kind of how he tries to fulfill these purposes. I want to look, and I didn't do this for everybody else because it's not relevant for everybody else, but because we're now talking about eventually Elrond and Elros, I felt like we really needed to get a grasp of what they represent in terms of bloodlines. So he marries Elwing, so we have to go back to figure that out. Her mother is Nimloth, who is descended from Thingol's brother Elmo. I think we talked about that before.
Oh, did we?
Oh, did we?
Tickle me, Thingol.
Oh man.
So she's her mother is 100% Sindar. I know, I just can't do it.
I can't get it out of her. Mr. Noodle. Come here, Mr. Noodle. Everybody who doesn't have kids has no idea what we're talking about.
I know.
They probably know Elmo, but maybe not Mr. Noodle.
No, even I had to struggle for Mr. Noodle. So anyway.
Please take it back. Sorry. I couldn't help it. The laughter just came out.
I know.
So
that's
Nimloth,
the whole point.
Right?
So her mother's Nimloth, who's descended from Thingol's brother. Her father is Dior, the son of Beren and Luthien. Now we've looked at him before. He's half human through his father Beren, and all of that is of the house of Beor. The other half is split. He's a quarter Sindar, because his mother was half Sindar through her father Thingol, and he's a quarter Maya from his grandmother Melian. So now we know that. So she's mostly Sindar with a measurable slice of human and a little bit less Maya.
Sure, yeah.
So then Eärendil, of course, he's half elf, half man, but we looked at that breakdown before, right? He's a little bit of that half elf. A big chunk of that is Vanyar, and a little bit less is Noldor. And then his half man is split, a quarter of the house of Beor and 1/8 each of the house of Hador and Haleth. So that makes their sons, Elrond and Elros, well, it makes them not the half-elven. It makes them the 9/16 elven. But that didn't sound right, did it?
No, yeah.
So they're 56.25% elf, and that mix, most of that, 31%, is Sindar, 16% of that is Vanyar, and only 9% is Noldor. So they're twice as much Sindar as they are Vanyar, and they're 4 times as much Sindar as they are Noldor. Then, of course, they're 37.5% man. That mix, again, is mostly the house of Beor with 25%, and then 6% each from the house of Hador and from the Haladin. And then there's the 6% that's Maiar. So it's a really intriguing mix. They're very little Noldor. They're like twice as much of the house of Beor as they are of the house
as they are
Noldor.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And there's more Hador and Haladin combined than there is Noldor. So, mostly Sindar.
And, that really goes a long way towards explaining, something like the the primacy of Galadriel in the elves that we see left by the Third Age. I mean,
yes, it does.
I always have a tendency to think of like Rivendell as like the cultured, the civilized place, and Lothlorien is a place of beauty and a place of nature, but it's not the lore,
right?
That Rivendell, it's not the center of lore that Rivendell is, and so there's something about Rivendell that almost feels more Noldorin, and something about Lothlorien that feels more, maybe Nandarin or Sindarin, something a little bit more close to nature.
Elf,
but
right.
Yeah, but then of course Galadriel is
Noldor.
She's an Noldo, and I know we looked at her genealogy before.
Mm-hmm.
She's not pure, but she's all Calaquendi.
That's true. Yeah,
that's really interesting,
isn't it? It's just fascinating.
Well, and it's worth noting also that although both Eärendil and Elwing are part elf, part human,
right?
Once again, we see he married up.
That's true. She's got the Maya blood.
Mm-hmm. She's got the
more
noble
blood because he's 50-50. Yeah, right. That's a very good point.
It's interesting. It's also interesting to me. I thought about this recently. There's a discussion on Facebook recently. We were talking about looking for sevens in the Legendarium, and I picked up on one here that Elrond and Elros actually have 7 kindreds in their lineage, which I don't know that it means anything. I just thought it was kind of a neat thing.
Well, it's just more of that combined stuff, the better together than apart.
Better together, yeah. Three houses of Eldar, 3 houses of Edain, and then this Mairen strain that that they're combined, that are combined in them.
And no dwarf blood. Just saying.
No dwarf blood at all.
Just remember what we've read before from one of Tolkien's letters, 153, that men and elves are biologically speaking the same race. Remember, he said that elves are, quote, certain aspects of men and their talents and desires incarnated in my little world. So they really are the same. So it's not a surprise that the divine plan, as we've talked about for the last several episodes, for the ennoblement of men, involves the DNA of each of the 3 elf kindreds, plus each of the 3 houses of the Edain, and a splash of that, what did you call it once, Maya juice?
I think I did, yeah.
Yeah.
I think I did.
In very poor taste.
I probably shouldn't have. Yeah.
You might regret that.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's true. So this divine plan for the ennoblement can be seen as it's really just a bringing together of these disparate threads of one race,
right?
With a splash of the Maya.
Yeah, it's amazing. And again, no dwarf. So
we're just gonna keep reminding everybody of that as we move into the Hobbit.
We will. So, what does he do? That is, what does Eärendil do to further his purpose?
Well, let me tell you about that, Alan.
Why don't you, Shawn?
I'm picking up a little bit into the next paragraph. Mm-hmm. With the aid of Círdan, Eärendil built Vingilot, the foam flower, fairest of the ships of song. Golden were its oars and white its timbers, hewn in the birch woods of Nimberthil, and its sails were as the argent moon. In the lay of Eärendil is many a thing sung of his adventures in the deep and in lands untrodden, and in many seas and in many isles. But Elwing was not with him, and she sat in sorrow by the mouths of Sirion. Eärendil found not Tuor nor Idril, nor came he ever on that journey to the shores of Valinor, defeated by shadows and enchantment, driven by repelling winds, until in longing for Elwing he turned homewards towards the coast of Beleriand.
My goodness. I want to focus on that sorrow and his return, but I got to start with the beauty of that ship.
Oh,
this
white
ship
ships of songs,
with the golden oars and the silver sails.
Yeah,
I say silver. He said argent, but that actually there's a sidebar. You say silver, I say argent. Potato.
Let's call the whole thing off.
Well, exactly. Let's. This is actually one of the few times that Tolkien uses a word with Latin roots, argent in this case, when a perfectly good English word, silver, was available. I looked it up. As you know, silver, of course, has Old Norse and Gothic roots. I mean, it really goes way back in the English language, whereas argent comes from Latin and came into English in the Middle English. So much more recent word, and the kind of word that Tolkien usually would be like, that should never be used. We should always use. What did he say?
The goodliness of speechcraft.
The goodliness of English speechcraft.
Yeah.
I did again, having an ebook is really nice. I just did a quick search for silver, and silver had already been used, not even counting after this in the Akalabeth and of the Rings of Power, but just so far in the Quenta, the word silver had been used 15 times, and this is the first appearance of the word argent.
Of the word argent, wow.
Even though they mean the same thing.
That is very word nerd of you. I like that.
Every once in a while you inspire me.
I like that quite a bit. Yeah, that's a good point that you raised that. It's not a word Tolkien used often. Interestingly, it is a word that he used in that Voyage of Eärendil poem.
Yeah,
that I read for Tolkien Reading Day. Yeah, he referred referring to the ship. Although he was talking about the timbers, he called it an argent timbered bark.
Yes, that's right.
So talking about the wood as opposed to the sails, but still in reference to the ship. So there's definitely a common thread there.
Interesting. But boy, that sorrow, the sorrow of Elwing. I know most of our listeners, I shouldn't say most, I really have no idea whether our listeners have read Unfinished Tales. I certainly hope that you bought it because you were supposed to in order to get through the Tuor chapter.
Get through the Tuor stuff.
And if you have, you also have the tale of Eärendil and Elwing, which is a second-age story that takes place in Numenor, but it kind of made me think of that. This idea that, here he is off in the sea and she's sorrowful by herself. It's a sad moment.
Yeah.
But,
it's a very sad story.
It is a very sad story,
but it's a very human story. It's very personal, kind of family strife as opposed to
you're not kidding.
Sort of the world changing stuff that we tend to see in the Legendarium.
Yeah,
but you're right. I think that's a good catch. I didn't think about that, but this kind of
presages that or echoes that a little bit. Minus the whole ending of that story, and that doesn't end well for Eärendil and Elwing.
Right.
But anyway,
interesting.
So, but I do love, and part of the reason of that is because he turned, home with longing for his wife, which is
longing
something
for
that
his
we don't
wife.
see with Eärendil and Elwing. But
right, no, it's interesting. It's one of the things I talked about when we read all those poems a few episodes ago was that there's that structure of the poems where the structure of the journey really.
Yeah,
where he kind of
that's right.
Departs,
and
he
how
wanders
all of them
kind
had
of
that same
aimlessly.
structure. It was so cool.
And then he wanders aimlessly. He struggles with something, usually either getting lost or something like that.
Right.
And then returns.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's really interesting. It's really key here that it's not that defeat. It's partly the defeat, but it's ultimately really longing for his wife that sends him home.
Yeah, and it seems like he kept on trying, even though he was being defeated by these shadows. But it was until in longing for Elwing he turned homeward.
Yeah.
So.
And already in just a couple of paragraphs, although we don't see much of Eärendil, you really see a lot about his spirit, his heart. His longing for his parents, his longing for his wife. He's a family guy.
Man.
Yeah.
So, no wonder you like him so much.
It's true. It's true. Because I am a family man.
Yep. And we thank our families for allowing us to spend inordinate amounts of time recording this podcast.
Preparing for and recording this podcast.
You can thank them too.
Yes.
He turns homeward, and it's a good thing he turns homeward in haste. We're going to skip the next little bit, and then I'm going to pick up almost at the end of the next paragraph and find out what's happening in his in his hometown while he's out on the sea. And this is a really sorrowful thing. And so there came to pass. Okay, before we read that, let's just sum up the previous paragraph. We won't explain because there's not enough time. We'll sum up.
Let me explain. No.
Basically, they find out that the Silmaril is there and that Elwing has it, so they send notes and say you need to give it up. And she says basically, go pound sand. Dior was killed for this, and my husband's out on the ocean, so we'll talk about it later. And that's not good enough for the sons of that ever so charming Feanor. And so there came to pass the last and cruelest of the slayings of elf by elf, and that was the third of the great wrongs achieved by the accursed oath. For the sons of Feanor that yet lived came down suddenly upon the exiles of Gondolin and the remnant of Doriath, and destroyed them. In that battle some of their people stood aside, and some few rebelled, and were slain upon the other part, aiding Elwing against their own lords, for such was the sorrow and confusion in the hearts of the Eldar in those days. But Maedhros and Maglor won the day, though they alone remained thereafter of the sons of Feanor, for both Amrod and Amras were slain. Oh my goodness.
Wow. Third kinslaying.
Just and wiped out this last. These were the gleanings. This was it.
There's so few of them left. We talked about this last time. So few free people left in Beleriand, and they're going to kill each other
over a rock, over a shiny rock.
Yeah.
And again, we talked before about how, with one exception, Feanor's sons never went after the Silmaril when it was
when it was with Morgoth. When Morgoth had all three of them. Yeah.
They never went after when they had all three. They went after him, with the Nirnaeth. Was originally going to be, we're going to go attack Morgoth with the Union of Mithros. But other than that, the only times they went after it were when it was with other elves.
Yeah.
And it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And we're even reminded the sons of Feanor that yet lived. Oh, yeah, because 3 of them died in the last kinslaying.
Right.
Yep.
All the Seas died in the last one.
Yeah. The Sea Bros.
Yeah. Sea Bros.
Sea Bros.
Yeah.
They really were. Aren't they bros? I mean, really. Celegorm, those are ultimately bros.
They're totally bros.
Totally bros. And I don't mean that as a compliment.
No. Come on, bro. Let's go get the Silmaril, bro.
Let's go get
I think Dior's got the Silmaril now, bro. Let's go get it, bro.
Okay. Wow, it's really bad, man. We're gonna get some hate mail.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the amount of well, not hate mail, but dislike mail I've gotten on Feanor. Man.
Hey, it says right here the oath is accursed.
Yes.
That is not a word you use of
the
something. The
great wrongs achieved by the accursed oath.
Yeah, that's not a word that suggests any kind of moral ambiguity on the part of the Feanorians here. I'm sorry.
It doesn't. I agree. But I do love that some of their people were rebelled. Some said, look, I can't do this. And others said, not only can I not do this, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to fight on the side of good.
Yeah.
But there's not enough of them. And Mithros and Maglor win the day. So the other 2 are slain. So now the only 2 sons of Feanor are Mithros and Maglor. That's
Mithros and Maglor.
Feanor's gone, and the other 5 sons are gone.
From 7 down to 2.
Yeah. And the so the Círdan doesn't get there in time. Gil-galad doesn't get there in time. Elwing's gone. Her sons are gone. And we're just summing up here again, not explaining because there's not enough time. Elrond and Elros are taken captive, and then Elwing has the Silmaril upon her breast in the Nauglamir and throws herself into the ocean. So they don't get the Silmaril, but it wasn't lost. And here's what's really cool. The aftermath. What happens? Well, Ulmo gives her
Ulmo steps in.
Yeah, Ulmo again. We saw this with Tuor. Ulmo is deeply involved in making this happen. He is Ilúvatar's instrument in accomplishing this goal.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something that, we just can't get away from. And we don't want to get away from it. We want to recognize that. We want to see that this is how Ilúvatar works. There's all these moving pieces. And if something else had happened, Ulmo would have done something else. I mean, this is all a combination of that fate and then the free will of Eärendil or of Tuor and now even of Elwing. So, he gives her this shape of a great white bird, and
that's so cool.
That's so beautiful. Yeah. Such an image, and we get more of that later, so we'll touch more on it then. But she falls onto the boat near death, and he doesn't. I'm assuming he's got to know it's her, but he doesn't, right? I mean, it doesn't say that he knows. He just takes this bird to his bosom, and in the morning he holds his wife in her own form.
Yeah, that's what's so lovely about it. I mean, I know we can't read all this, but there is as a white cloud exceeding swift beneath the moon, as a star over the sea.
Isn't that there's poetry right there in the middle of the prose paragraph?
And she's in bird form, which is cool to begin with. Yeah. And she's flying. She's so
so fast that she's basically dead when she gets there.
Exhausting herself, and she swoons when she reaches Eärendil and his ship and collapses onto the boat, nigh unto death for the urgency of her speed. And he just picks her up, takes her to his bosom.
Yeah,
and we're not told that he knew it was her.
Yeah,
and in fact, I mean, maybe he didn't, because it says in the morning with marveling eyes he beheld her in her own form. So I don't think he knew it was her. I think he's just
he almost if she had the Silmaril on her breast.
That Silmaril looks awfully familiar.
This bird is wearing a necklace that looks a lot like my wife's.
Like my wife's.
I don't know if he knew, but certainly there was at least a suspicion. But
that probably could have sensed it.
The Silmaril might have given it away.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is beautiful. I love that sentiment.
It is, and it's such a tender moment. I love when she wakes up and, her own form beside him with her hair upon his face, and she slept. It's such
her hair upon his face. Isn't that a beautiful, personal moment?
It is, and it's as tender as anything we see with Beren and Luthien. Yeah,
Very
intimate
so.
is a good word for it. Yeah.
It's just really
love
neat.
that.
So again, we're not going to read this next paragraph, but there's this really cool little bit that kind of happens in the midst of all this horrible stuff is that Maglor, who is absolutely sick of the oath, just sick of it, takes pity on Elros and Elrond, and he ends up loving them, and they end up loving him. They look at him like a dad, basically. Love grew between them, as the text says.
I like
that's
that.
a really interesting thing. A little Stockholm syndrome right there.
A little bit. But it's really the transition or the transformation of Maglor, really.
That's exactly
what we see. And this whole chapter is full of this.
We will see more, much more.
Yeah, we will see so much more. Maglor really emerges as, oh, really? You're the good one? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I didn't see that coming.
I know. I would have always thought Maedhros, but I mean, Maglor's always been my second favorite,
Sure.
I mean, if you got to have a favorite amongst the sons of that guy.
Feanorians. But yeah, it's interesting to see, right? Yeah, but it's interesting to see how Maedhros, who's always one of our favorites,
right? I mean, well,
we'll get to that. But yeah, Maglor's transformation really is one of the great reveals of this chapter. I think
it is. I agree. So we've gone through the third kinslaying and then the aftermath. So if at first you don't succeed, you want to take this next paragraph for us?
Yeah, let's try again. Yet Eärendil saw now no hope left in the lands of Middle-earth, and he turned again in despair, and came not home, but sought back once more to Valinor, with Elwing at his side. He stood now most often at the prow of Vingilot, and the Silmaril was bound upon his brow, and ever its light grew greater as they drew into the west. And the wise have said that it was by reason of the power of that holy jewel that they came in time to waters that no vessels, save those of the Teleri, had known. And they came to the enchanted isles, and escaped their enchantment. And they came into the shadowy seas, and passed their shadows. And they looked upon Tolaresia, the lonely isle, but tarried not. And at the last they cast anchor in the bay of Eldamar, and the Teleri saw the coming of that ship out of the east. And they were amazed, gazing from afar upon the light of the Silmaril, and it was very great. Then Eärendil, first of living men, landed on the immortal shores, and he spoke there to Elwing and to those that were with him. And there were 3 mariners who had sailed all the seas beside him. Falathar, Erelant, and Eärendil were their names. And Eärendil said to them, Here none but myself shall set foot, lest you fall under the wrath of the Valar. But that peril I will take on myself alone, for the sake of the 2 kindreds. But Elwing answered, Then would our paths be sundered forever. But all thy perils I will take on myself also.
Wow. My goodness. So much there.
Wow. So much.
I love just even Elwing's last line. That's very Luthien. It makes me think of Beren saying, I'm going to go do this because this is my job. And Luthien saying, I'm going with you.
I'm coming with you. Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome.
And it's important to note the role Elwing plays here. We talk so much, and I'm very guilty of this being the story of Eärendil, but it is the story of Eärendil and Elwing. It is their quest.
Absolutely.
It is their quest together. You can see the Silmaril was the reason he made it as far as he made it.
And he would not have the Silmaril had she not jumped into the sea and then been, birdified.
Right.
Is that a word, birdified?
It is now. Yeah,
and
the only other word I could think of is maybe aviated, but that doesn't. That has another meaning.
Oh my! We have another instance of the Silmarils responding to circumstances. We've talked about inanimate objects and semi-sentience, and one of the things we talked about was the Silmarils responded to Luthien's voice, in the darkest dungeons of Morgoth. Well, here the light grows greater as they draw into the west. There is something
going home, it gets brighter.
Exactly. There's something in the Silmaril, some characteristic of the Silmaril that enables it to sense its location, and to be able to respond to external stimuli.
Yeah.
So it's got a GPS device and a speaker or a microphone.
Yeah. Or maybe some sort of a, I don't know, an affinity, like an alchemical affinity or something like that. I don't know. I mean, it's something like a resonance or something like that.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
But
I mean, I was obviously being sarcastic with the GPS device, but I hear what you mean. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I don't know where that, what that does in terms of our discussion of semi-sentience in these objects, but it is intriguing to see it, another example of it and how it responds to, in this case, its location and its travel.
Yeah. Well, and I hate to draw this comparison, but it reminds me a bit of the Ring. Although I guess the Ring is different because we know that it has sentience, we know that it's been imbued
with Sauron's power.
Yeah. So that is different.
Yeah. This is almost. I almost want to say this is more because not of the stone itself, but because of its hallowing. We don't see this as a characteristic of the hallowing. Right? The hallowing is so that nobody could touch it, that wasn't immortal and had clean hands and was not of evil will. But I wonder if it's that hallowing that is what enables it to be
as it gets closer, maybe
to the source of its hallowing. Right.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And,
we'll never know.
That, and I hate to use this word resonate again, but I'm going to. Maybe that hallowing sort of, kind of resonates in it or calls something up out of it that as it gets closer to home, it goes brighter. It's interesting.
It is interesting. I love the little kind of, it's not alliterative, but it's repetitive. They came to the Enchanted Isles and escaped their enchantment. They came into the shadowy seas and passed their shadows. I love that. I don't know why. I just do.
That's cool. It's got a nice repetition to it.
It does.
And
it's kind of defeating these little hurdles, and it's reminding you that.
You get a sense of like achieving each level of the quest.
Exactly.
Because the Eärendil the game, you could see those being the different levels of the game.
Dude,
I would totally play that game.
I passed the shadowy seas so fast. That level was so easy.
Did you get the Silmaril yet? I can't.
Left, right, up, down, up, down. BBX.
That's how you do it. I need to get the Elwing cheat, man. I don't know where to get them.
The Elwing cheat. Tolaresia, and they just look at it and go, well, I'm not stopping there.
Nope. I'm keep going.
Got to keep moving. And then, of course, I understand that if you guys have 3 more sons, you're naming them Falithar, Eärendil, and Eärendil.
Yeah,
Does your wife know this?
Probably, yeah. Yeah.
And you have those names memorized?
Yeah. Well, she agreed to let me name one of our kids after the Evening Star, so, there's that.
There is that. Oh, my.
Man. I do love those names, though.
They're cool names.
They're kind of cool. Yeah.
But it's funny because we get the names and then we only see them again once, and that's to say goodbye. And it's kind of like, oh goodness, there were some other names. All the people in Barahir's company. That's one.
Oh yeah.
Gorlam the Unhappy was the only one.
We named them all, and then the only one we see again is Gorlam.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
It's kind of like red shirts, except they don't. In this case, they don't die. So I guess that's handy. So she does, she says, I'm coming with you.
It's kind of the opposite of die, really. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Well, yeah.
They got sent safely back home.
They did. They absolutely did. So, so she jumps in. Oh man, I wish he hadn't done that. But the sailors stay there, and then I'm going to go ahead and read this next paragraph. Then Eärendil said to Elwing, "Await me here. For one only may bring the message that it is my fate to bear." And he went up alone into the land, and came into the Calakiria, and it seemed to him empty and silent. For even as Morgoth and Ungoliant came in ages past, so now Eärendil had come at a time of festival, and well nigh all the elven folk were gone to Valamar, or were gathered in the halls of Manwë upon Taniquetil, and few were left to keep watch upon the walls of Tirion. And you don't know how close I came to saying Taniquetil. Thanks to you trying to poison my mind last week.
I didn't do anything. I was thinking positive thoughts.
Really? I think you were thinking Taniquetil.
No, I was thinking positive. I was thinking Eärendil thoughts for you.
Quetzalcoatl, Aztec. I could hear the messages in my head. Just kidding.
Yeah. That's all right. I got the tuna in the next one. So.
So I just want you to notice once again. Major event happens at A time of festival.
Yeah.
This time, at least, it's a good event.
Yeah, this might be the only time something good actually happens at a festival.
Yeah, but what have we seen? We've seen the attack on Gondolin. We saw, of course, the attack on the trees, and even before that, Morgoth's creation of a tomb.
Marring of Arda with the not the
not the marring,
toppling of the lamps.
Yeah, the toppling of the lamps, the creation of a tomb. No.
Yeah. Was it? Yeah.
No, not the toppling of the lamps. That was after.
Was it after?
Yeah, the creation of a tomb. No, he came in.
Creation of a tomb happened after Tulkas' wedding night.
Right, when he was sleeping, weary, and content. And then after that is when he came and toppled the lamps.
Okay,
so
that was it.
I don't think a festival was still going on. But yes, party time is also.
I don't know, those Valar know how to throw a party.
Boy, they sure do. It could have been
yeah, you're right. No, that was it. Tons of bad things happen at the time of festival.
But now we get a good thing.
Now it's a good thing, and I kind of feel like this is a sign that the world is kind of turning a corner.
We can still have festivals. Yeah.
Yeah. We can still have nice things.
We can sometimes.
We can still have a good time every once in a while.
There you go. So he does, make it into Tirion because nobody's really there. I do love that they were either in Valimar or they were gathered in the halls of Manwë. I have a feeling that's where the OMG
Vanyar?
The Vanyar. I couldn't remember their name for a moment. So the remaining Noldor
I've poisoned you with that too. They're forever.
You really have. They're forever the OMG Manwë clan. I feel so bad, but we never really do see them. Except we'll see them again later in this chapter.
Yes,
won't we
will. Yes, we will.
And they are not to be trifled with. So, no. All right.
But you figure they must have the VIP badges at the the park.
Absolutely. No, here, friend of Manwë.
I'm on the list.
Seriously.
Ingwe.
King of,
son of no one.
Son of no one, firstborn. So he does get in there. What happens when he gets into the town?
All right. But Eärendil climbed the green hill of Tuna and found it bare. And he entered into the streets of Tirion, and they were empty. And his heart was heavy, for he feared that some evil had come even to the blessed realm. He walked in the deserted ways of Tirion, and the dust upon his raiment and his shoes was a dust of diamonds, and he shone and glistened as he climbed the long white stairs. And he called aloud in many tongues, both of elves and men, but there were none to answer him. Therefore he turned back at last towards the sea. But even as he took the shoreward road, one stood upon the hill and called to him in a great voice, crying, "Hail, Eärendil, of mariners most renowned, the looked for that cometh at unawares, the longed for that cometh beyond hope. Hail, Eärendil, bearer of light before the sun and moon, splendor of the children of earth, star in the darkness, jewel in the sunset, radiant in the morning." That voice was the voice of Eönwë, herald of Manwë, and he came from Valimar, and summoned Eärendil to come before the powers of Arda.
My goosebumps are only just now fading. That moment when Eönwë hails him is perhaps the high point of the entire book in my mind.
It definitely is for me. I mean, I think it is the most just astonishing visual, the most astonishing dialogue, and thank you so much for
letting you read that.
For letting me have that one and not fighting me over it.
That was tough. I knew from the very beginning, though. I knew I was lucky to not have this as a solo episode for you. So I'm just happy to be here. It's a pleasure just to be nominated.
It is good to have you here with me.
I'm glad. Thank you, Shawn. You're right about the visual. I mean, you're seeing this beautiful city, but it's empty, and you can see the close up on his feet with the dust on his raiment and his shoes is a dust of diamonds. And he's climbing this long white staircase, calling out in Sindarin and in Noldor, and or Quenya, and perhaps even in whatever speech men are using. I guess
Adonaic or whatever they're using by this point. Yeah, and the fear. I love this. This kind of fear. This heavy heart. This fear that he has. can you imagine? He's walking these empty streets and he's thinking,
did Morgoth come back here?
Did Morgoth? Yeah, right. Has even Valinor been overtaken?
Oh.
Because that's all he's known. He's known is living life among these gleanings of men and elves. You know, this world that is dying.
That is absolutely getting wiped out by evil. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And
but that moment where Eärendil hails him is so beautiful.
Oh, it's amazing.
I love that line. The looked for that cometh at unawares. The longed for that cometh beyond hope. We're going to talk so much more about that, but just beautiful.
And it's I think it's very significant that it only happens. Eärendil only appears to him after he turns back.
Yeah. I think
there's something in that he thinks he's failed. He thinks he's come here and that there's nothing. Can you imagine what he must be feeling?
Oh.
To think that I've made it all this way. I made it through the shadows and
now I'm going to turn around and go back.
And now I'm going to turn around and go back because there's nobody here. There's no help. There's this hope that we've looked for from the West is not here. And to turn back, and then that's the moment when Eärendil appears to him. Oh, it just gives me chills talking about it.
Mm. And that line at the end of Eärendil's Hail, where he describes who Eärendil is, it so presages this what we'll end up seeing him do in terms of being the morning star, the star in the darkness, the jewel in the sunset, and radiant in the morning. Mm-hmm. That's the morning star right there. Yep. That's Venus. It is. In the sunset, it's this jewel. You can see it, as the sun goes down, you can see it right away. And in the morning, you see it before the dawn comes.
Man.
But he is summoned.
He is summoned, yeah. He's he's come this far. You know?
And, unlike Fëanor, he comes willingly. Being summoned to him is...
He's not being summoned to the principal's office.
Though who knows?
Although he doesn't know at this point, does he?
Yeah. All he knows is that he has a message to deliver. That's all he knows. All he knows, he's going to be, wiped out.
They're going to say,
we're
okay,
not
thanks
supposed to be here.
Thanks for delivering the message, and now you're going to be killed because you don't belong here.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to read the next little bit. Then the Valar took counsel together, and they summoned Ulmo from the deeps of the sea. And Eärendil stood before their faces and delivered the errand of the two kindreds. Pardon, he asked, for the Noldor, and pity for their great sorrows, and mercy upon men and elves, and succor in their need. And his prayer was granted. It is told among the elves that after Eärendil had departed, seeking Elwing his wife, Mandos spoke concerning his fate, and he said, Shall mortal man step living upon the undying lands and yet live? But Ulmo said, For this he was born into the world, and say unto me, whether is he Eärendil Tuor's son of the line of Hador, or the son of Idril, Turgon's daughter of the elven house of Finwë? And Mandos answered, Equally the Noldor, who went willfully into exile, may not return hither. But when all was spoken, Manwë gave judgment, and he said, In this matter the power of doom is given to me. The peril that he ventured for love of the two kindreds shall not fall upon Eärendil, nor shall it fall upon Elwing his wife, who entered into peril for love of him. But they shall not walk again ever among elves or men in the outer lands. And this is my decree concerning them. To Eärendil and to Elwing and to their sons shall be given leave each to choose freely to which kindred their fates shall be joined, and under which kindred they shall be judged. My goodness. My goodness.
What a debate. I mean...
Yeah. Makes me think of that really cool debate on the statute of Finwë and
Miriel and Finwë, yeah.
They each make really valid points.
Yeah.
But Manwë in the end has the decision to be made.
Yeah.
But I love how Mandos always has to have the last word.
Mandos is, even if he's Noldor, he can't come back. Yeah.
I mean,
the Noldor aren't welcome here any more than men are. So.
Fine, he's not a man.
Oops, okay, yes. Point Mandos.
Exactly, except, that Mandos still isn't remembering that that at least, let's see, so Elwing is mostly Sindar. Eärendil is actually more Vanyar than Noldor.
That's true, yeah.
You know? So,
that's true.
It's like, come on, dude.
Yeah. Mandos just being difficult.
Mandos exactly is just being difficult, but
I love Ulmo's work. I mean, not only Ulmo's, challenge about, well, whose son is he really, but
right.
He was born into the world.
Purpose.
Fate. that's the purpose for which he was created, and that's where this, taking us back to Eonwe's words, the looked for that cometh at unawares, the longed for that cometh beyond hope. I mean, how much that echoes the words of Ulmo that we saw in of Tuor and His Coming to Gondolin.
That's why that section was so important for us to read. I'm really glad we did. I know it was hard to do an extra episode, but man, that conversation between Ulmo and Tuor so crucial.
Yeah, it really is, to really understand the significance of and Ulmo's words in that were the hope that they have not looked for and have not prepared. I mean, that is almost exactly the same thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
deep, so meaningful. I love this. And I love, it's so short that he delivers the errand. He asks for pardon and for pity and for mercy and for succor. And his prayer was granted.
His prayer is granted. That's it.
Done. End of story, I mean, you could wrap it right there, but you don't, thankfully. Just amazing stuff. This is such a beautiful section.
It's interesting that you bring that up. Again, obviously this is a very short chapter to get such an important story in, just the nature of the Silmarillion.
Yeah, it's very dense. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is interesting that we don't hear, there's no arguing. He doesn't have to present a case or anything. He just asks and we see it seems that he grants it. They grant it. And it kind of tells you that, this is fated.
And they were ready for it.
They were, that's a good point.
We go back to Tuor, and what do we find out that, let's see, because Ulmo went back to the Valar and said, we really need to help them out. And the Valar were like, no, it's going to have to come from somebody who can represent both.
Speaking on behalf of both kindreds, that's right.
Yeah.
And,
so I think
they're like,
waiting.
Okay, well, here he is.
And that's why.
He proved his worth just by getting there, really.
Yeah. Which is only feasible through the Silmaril. Yeah.
Right.
That's why this is such an important story. I know we're going to get to this, so I don't want to go too deep. But you talked about how this is kind of like the postscript to the Tuor story, but really it's the postscript to the other two too. I mean, because the Nauglamir, which the Nauglamir comes out of the tale of Turin, because that's what Hurin brought from the horde in Nargothrond. Yeah. So that's a big part of the story. But then you also have to look at Beren and Luthien, because he's married to Elwing. Mm-hmm. And without Elwing, the story doesn't happen. So it's really the culmination of all three.
Right. That's really true. And without Beren and Luthien getting the Silmaril in the first place, this doesn't happen. And this is the final fulfillment of bringing the Silmaril back to where it belongs.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely it is.
Wow. That's a good point.
But yeah, it
is the culmination of all three stories. You're right.
It's such a that's why this is so masterfully done.
Mm-hmm. It's true.
You wade through, and I say that lovingly, because of course I really love every chapter in this story except for the map chapter. But you wade through some of this difficult stuff because the payoff's going to be worth it. You get to this chapter and you read it and all the threads come together.
Finally, everything
makes
together.
sense.
Everything clicks.
Mm-hmm. It really does. And it's so well done, but it's so fast because, like you said, it's a short chapter. So, my goodness. So I've got a big passage for you to read, a very important passage. But before we do, I want to sum up. I'm going to keep using that term. I'm going to sum up the next paragraph. There's not enough time to explain. That while he's in there talking, business with the Valar, she's actually out chatting with the Teleri. She'd gone down to the sea by Alqualonde. And so she, befriends them and they listen to her stories, which is really important because we're going to find out later, what that helps the Teleri decide to do. But I thought that reminded me, though, about her bloodline, because she is she's mostly Sindar, which of course really is Teleri. I mean, Teleri. That's the Teleri that didn't make it. So she's related, right? She's descended through her mom from Elmo, the brother of Elwë and Olwë. You know, and Elwë's dead. All those little tiny stab wounds in his legs from the dwarves. He just bled out,
she's only a few generations removed from
right.
her grandfather,
she's like, I think,
Thingol.
3 generations from 2 generations from Thingol and 3 generations on her mother's side from Elmo.
Right.
So she's like a grand niece of the king.
Yeah. So, granddaughter, right?
No, she's of
Thingol,
not of Thingol. I was thinking of Olwe. I was thinking of their king.
Of Olwe. Okay, yes.
Of the Lord of the Teleri.
Yeah, right. I'm actually thinking back to when Elwë was the king of the Teleri, and
that's true. When he was the co-king.
And here's
she's only the granddaughter
of him, and they're thinking, how is Elwë? Oh, well.
Wait, no, I guess it would be great granddaughter, right? Because Luthien's daughter, Dior's grandson. She's the great granddaughter.
So, yes, you're right. You're right, great granddaughter.
But I think she's also 3 generations from Elmo on her mom's side, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
I'd have to look that up. But anyway, I just really that needed to be mentioned real quick.
That's really significant. Yeah,
it is. Mm-hmm. But now we get another beautiful passage that you had to pry from my cold, dead fingers.
You are such a wonderful co-host. Have I told you that lately?
The check's in the mail?
Yeah, exactly. Then Eärendil said to Elwing, "Choose thou, for now I am weary of the world." And Elwing chose to be judged among the firstborn children of Ilúvatar because of Lúthien. And for her sake, Eärendil chose alike, though his heart was rather with the kindred of men and the people of his father. Then, at the bidding of the Valar, Eönwë went to the shore of Aman, where the companions of Eärendil still remained, awaiting tidings. And he took a boat, and the 3 mariners were set therein, and the Valar drove them away into the east with a great wind. But they took Vingilot and hallowed it, and bore it away through Valinor to the uttermost rim of the world. And there it passed through the door of night, and was lifted up even into the oceans of heaven. Now fair and marvelous was that vessel made, and it was filled with a wavering flame, pure and bright. And Eärendil the mariner sat at the helm, glistening with dust of elven gems, and the Silmaril was bound upon his brow. Far he journeyed in that ship, even into the starless voids, but most often was he seen at morning or at evening, glimmering in sunrise or sunset, as he came back to Valinor from voyages beyond the confines of the world. Oof.
My goodness, what?
Man.
Wow.
So we talked about the morning star, the evening star, so here we have the other great astronomical myth of the Legendarium.
Exactly.
It took us the whole book to get to it.
Yeah, we did Sun and Moon already, but it took us like another 300 pages to get to Venus.
Yeah.
Oh, Venus. Sorry.
But this choice, man,
I know.
This is powerful. I mean,
oh man.
He asks her to choose for love of her. Again, he's a family man.
Yeah.
He wants her to choose, and she chooses to be with the elves. She chooses the life of the Eldar.
Right. And I find it fascinating that it's because of Lúthien. Now, because of course Lúthien chose to be counted among the men. So I find it interesting that her rationale for choosing to be counted among the elves is the woman who chose to be counted among men.
That's very interesting.
But I mean, she's the elven, she's the one from whom she's descended that's so, powerful. That's
just special to her. She must have just had felt really.
Her grandmother. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who knows whether?
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, it really is, and that's why she chose it. But, for her sake, Eärendil chose alike. Well, of course, he's not going to choose to be parted from her, but
no,
that would have been
hard. He really wanted to be with men. And so there is kind of a sacrifice here, isn't there? He sacrifices his own choice for her, and obviously, he's
and ultimately his future. I mean, I don't know what they would have done with this. I wonder if he had chosen to be among men, could he have done what they're going to do with him here, which is essentially an eternity sailing the skies,
basically making him immortal and letting him sail the skies forever. Yeah,
that would be a terrible curse if he were to be counted among men, because that would be essentially taking away the gift of Ilúvatar. So.
Right.
In a way, he certainly had to choose that in order to then play this very important role
for what happened to happen. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because otherwise he would have had to just be, let his life end, and they would have to figure out what else to do with the Silmaril. But I love this, that they don't say, all right, well, let's, maybe we can get a big hammer and figure out how to break it. It's just what we tried to do so many years ago. They instead decide to do something amazing with it.
Yeah.
And share it with the world. And we'll see shortly exactly how the world reacts.
What happens to that. Yeah, that's great.
But I love this. So the Silmaril's on his brow. He journeys, all the way into the starless voids. The picture is beautiful, glistening with the dust of elven gems. There's that diamond dust again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a lovely image. This idea that there's this wavering flame. The Valar set this wavering flame into the ship, but then it's that and the Silmaril, I guess, that sort of shine off of this dust of elven gems, and that's what makes him so bright.
What an image!
Oh, it's such a cool image.
And I love that, just like the Silmarils themselves, they took Vingilot and hallowed it. So they made it this sacred thing, and presumably, also included some sort of bubble. I mean, some sort of...
I can't breathe.
My eyeballs are popping out of my head.
Yep.
Help! Somebody catch my lungs. They're coming out.
Maybe they made a spacesuit.
He's not glistening with the dust of elven gems. It's that silvery foil stuff that the early astronauts wore.
Oh man, yeah.
So we're not going to read what happens with Elwing, but she stays behind in this white tower that's built for her, and she learns bird talk. And this brings us back to when she'd been turned into a bird. So they teach her how to fly, and she has wings. I mean, Red Bull gives you wings, but apparently...
so does hanging out in Valinor with birds.
With birds.
So funny.
But I love that because it enables her to go and fly to meet him when he's coming back. So they get a quick little... conjugal visit before he has to go back into the sky. I'm just saying. It's been a long day at work, honey.
I've only got 12 hours.
I've only got... But what a beautiful sight. I know I'm going to read the next couple paragraphs, but this line is so beautiful I have to read it, that the far-sighted among the elves that dwelt in the lonely isle would see her like a white bird, shining, rose-stained in the sunset, as she soared in joy to greet the coming of Vingilot to haven.
Oh, that's
Man, that's so cool. It just really is.
Yeah.
I love that she was, she was once a bird, or stayed at a Holiday Inn Express, I guess. And so she learns their language.
I think that one went over my head.
I was a bird, or I played one on TV. It's pretty cool. I love how that plays back to what Ulmo did in terms of turning her into or giving her a bird form. Not really turning her into one, but giving her a form of a bird, which is different.
Yeah.
But
it's so cool.
It really is. But I'm going to go ahead and read the next couple paragraphs because they're really important. Now, when first Vingilot was set to sail in the seas of heaven, it rose unlooked for, glittering and bright, and the people of Middle-earth beheld it from afar and wondered. And they took it for a sign and called it Gil-Estel, the star of high hope. And when this new star was seen at evening, Maedhros spoke to Maglor his brother, and he said, "Surely that is a Silmaril that shines now in the west?" And Maglor answered, "If it be truly the Silmaril which we saw cast into the sea, that rises again by the power of the Valar, then let us be glad, for its glory is seen now by many, and is yet secure from all evil." Then the elves looked up and despaired no longer, but Morgoth was filled with doubt. Oh yes.
Oh yes.
Gil-Estel.
The star of high hope.
Of high hope. And again, there's that word, Estel. We've talked about the different kinds of hope. This is the star of high hope.
Yeah, here it's translated as high hope. I like that translation. It's a nice, simple translation.
It is. It really is. It's that like we've talked about that difference before. It's not the, wow, I sure hope the weather, clears up.
Right. Right.
This is a certain hope, a hope.
It's hope based on something. And
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a hope that's, tied up in faith and belief and a lot of different, a lot of different things. And
trust that Ilúvatar's plan is going to be accomplished.
Yeah. And because of all that, it's a very hard word to define simply, and that's why I really like, or not to define, but to translate simply.
Yeah,
I like this high hope.
But high hope certainly works well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And boy, the response of Maglor and Maedhros is really, it's foreshadowing. Yeah.
I mean, I love that they recognize it right away.
Oh yeah. Almost had to not.
And Maedhros doesn't have to say what he's thinking, but you can tell. He's like, oh, it's there.
Up in the sky.
Yeah.
we can't.
How are we going to get to that? Maybe let's see if we can build a really tall ladder. We don't know how to build any ships. Certainly not any flying ships.
No.
But Maglor's response, though, is what I really love here.
Let's just be glad that it's where it is.
Yeah. Secure from all evil and its glories, seen now by many.
And that really is the point. It makes me think, go all the way back to Fëanor. He didn't want it to be seen by many. He got all nasty about it and kept it locked up because he begrudged the sight of it to all but his sons.
Yep, that jealous, possessive love that he had.
And you see that Maglor doesn't have that.
He's finally turned around, and he says, awesome. You know what? Let's just let the world enjoy it.
Yeah, because at least it's safe. The whole point about us trying to get them back is because we didn't want Morgoth to have them. Well, guess what? True. Morgoth doesn't have this one.
That's true. That's true.
I mean, sure, we promised that we would bring, rain vengeance down on anybody. Be he man, Vala, elf, or man yet unborn, or any creature
whatever
heretofore unnamed, but that may eventually exist.
but notwithstanding the previous paragraph,
not limited to, but I mean, it's such a man. Yeah, I do love Maglor's response. Mm-hmm. It's really neat.
But what about Morgoth?
Yeah, what about Morgoth? So we're gonna sum up the next paragraph. That Morgoth doesn't think anything's ever gonna happen. He's sitting over there monologuing to his chiefs, going, "I've separated them from the Valar, and they're gonna sit over there, and they're never gonna come over here. This place is ours." Mm-hmm. And so he has no clue that they're coming. But the Valar prepare for battle. The Vanyar march beneath their white banners. So do the Noldor that never left, the ones who were behind Finarfin. But interestingly, the Teleri were unwilling to go because they remembered the slaying at the Swanhaven and the rape of their ships.
Oh, yeah, they did.
Yes, they do. But, because Elwing had befriended them, they sent mariners enough to sail the ships. So they are, they're piloting the amphibious assault vehicles. But they're keeping their feet wet. They are not going on into Middle-earth.
Well, and what's interesting, I've just now thought about this, but when we talk about, the slaying at Aqualande, I mean, we've read an entire book of stories that have happened since then. But remember, it's only been a little over 500 years.
That's true.
So, for elves that have lived, how many years do we figure there were before the rising of the sun and the moon? Like thousands and thousands of years that the elves had lived in Valinor. So these are Teleri who have lived for thousands of years. Yeah. 500 years is not that long to them. Of course they remember this.
No. I mean, these are, some of them are presumably survivors of the battle. Others might be, descendants of those. I've talked about this before. I know that some have called this an exaggeration, but it certainly seems to me like Fëanor's actions, practically border on, genocide, attempted genocide, trying to wipe out an entire kin. And I know that that's probably overstating it to some extent, but he was willing to wipe out every last Teleri if he needed to.
If he had to, he would.
But, so some survived, and the rest would be descended from those who survived, so they certainly remember what happened. And it wasn't just the kinslaying, it was the burning of the ships, the theft and burning of the ships.
Yep.
So, once again, if they just brought the ships back...
It reminds you of the way they burned bridges with, all the Noldor and Beleriand,
absolutely.
And even Thingol, wasn't it? That, they just would not...
Yeah.
Nobody will work with the Sons of Fëanor anymore.
No, yeah, exactly, for good reason.
You can't get work in Hollywood anymore. Nobody will work with them.
That's right. They're blacklisted.
Yeah.
And so I know it's weird for me to read the next passage as well, but we've had so many of the good stuff, of the good passages.
I'm good. I don't need to read anything
so
else.
I'm going to read this. Oh no, you still get.
No, I know I will, but I'm just saying I'm happy. I'm fine. I'm content.
I think you got a couple more, but I'm going to read this first part of the battle. So, of the march of the host of the Valar to the north of Middle-earth, little is said in any tale, for among them went none of those elves who had dwelt and suffered in the hitherlands, and who made the histories of those days that still are known. And tidings of these things they only learned long afterwards from their kinsfolk in Amand. But at the last the might of Valinor came up out of the west, and the challenge of the trumpets of Eönwë filled the sky, and Beleriand was ablaze with the glory of their arms. For the host of the Valar were arrayed in forms young and fair and terrible, and the mountains rang beneath their feet. The meeting of the hosts of the west and of the north is named the Great Battle and the War of Wrath. There was marshaled the whole power of the throne of Morgoth, and it had become great beyond count, so that Anfauglith could not contain it, and all the north was aflame with war. But it availed him not. The Balrogs were destroyed, save some few that fled and hid themselves in caverns inaccessible at the roots of the earth. And the uncounted legions of the orcs perished like straw in a great fire, or were swept like shriveled leaves before a burning wind. Is that a powerful visual or what?
Oh, yeah.
Like straw in a fire or leaves before a burning wind.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Uncounted legions.
Yep.
Gone.
Yeah. I mean, this is like better than, it's like the visual at the end of Peter Jackson's Return of the King, when you've got all the fleeing orcs and the earth just collapsing underneath them. This is
right. This is
better than
better.
that. Yeah, and I'm not knocking that movie.
No, that's actually one of those cool moments.
Yeah, exactly. This is amazing.
The Balrogs destroyed,
save some few.
Yeah, boy, is that foreboding.
I wonder who that's going to be.
Doran's Bane.
We'll see. Doran's Bane. We'll see one of them at least once.
At least one. The uncounted legions perish like straw in a great fire. Man, just you can just see them getting just wiped out
by this
lightning fast by this massive army of the Valar and the Vanyar, and a little bit of the Noldor and the Teleri. Well, not Teleri, sorry, a little bit of the Noldor.
Yeah, right, exactly. The Teleri did not.
They did not
get out of their boats, did they?
No, they did not step foot on Middle Earth, and I can't.
I mean, they,
them.
As you were just saying, they didn't even want to. They didn't want to do this.
No.
But at least they agreed to. To sail the ships.
Well, and they did that specifically because of their relationship
with Elwing.
With Elwing, exactly.
Yeah.
So unbelievable. I love this. And I also love this nod to why we don't have a lot of information on this. This is once again kind of a reminder of the context of the book. We've talked about that kind of the meta of the story itself.
Yeah, the idea that it's a history. It's an in-universe document. It's something that was written by the elves themselves.
Right, and passed down through men, and eventually Bilbo writing it down, presumably. Right. But it's just an interesting observation about the nature of the book.
It wasn't written by the Vanyar. It wasn't written by the Teleri of Alquilande. It wasn't written by the Valar, obviously.
No.
Yeah.
And in fact, I think we got a piece of that earlier, way back in either, maybe it was the Valaquenta or actually I think it was chapter 1, and how we don't, there's not a lot here. We don't have a very clear history of this because nobody who could write this down was there.
Right.
So, it all had to be told to them later. So anyway, intriguing, but that's why we don't get much of the march itself.
Which is terrible. I wish we had some.
Yeah. I want to know where they landed. Did they land probably near the mouths of Sirion? I would imagine, just because the Bay of Valar was probably the only place big enough to have all those ships queue up.
Yeah.
Then march up the valley of the Sirion and right straight up to Anfauglith.
Mm-hmm. Man,
my
how cool.
Goodness. Yeah. Because they didn't go across the Helcarax.
No. They don't need to.
Mm-mm.
They got a job to do.
Yeah.
Oh, they are coming. I mean,
they are coming.
Can you imagine what Morgoth is thinking right about now?
Oh, man, he's thinking, I am in trouble.
Oh.
Valar are here? I'm sorry, who did you say? What?
But I'm king of the world.
Yeah. Don't they know?
Nope.
I've named this unto myself forever.
I named this unto myself. When it's the last time I get to say that.
I know. I'm so sad about that. That was one of my favorite little bits.
I know.
Oh, so he is, in very serious trouble. In fact, the text says that he quailed.
Oh, yes.
Which is a great word. But what happens? Oh, I've got to hear this.
Mm-hmm. But he loosed upon his foes the last desperate assault that he had prepared. And out of the pits of Angband there issued the winged dragons that had not before been seen. And so sudden and ruinous was the onset of that dreadful fleet that the host of the Valar was driven back. For the coming of the dragons was with great thunder and lightning and a tempest of fire. But Eärendil came, shining with white flame, and about Vingilot were gathered all the great birds of heaven, and Thorondor was their captain. And there was battle in the air all the day and through a dark night of doubt. Before the rising of the sun, Eärendil slew Ancalagon the Black, the mightiest of the dragon host, and cast him from the sky. And he fell upon the towers of Thangorodrim, and they were broken in his ruin.
Oh, what a line.
I'll stop there so we can talk about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Once again, chills. Eärendil coming in, saved the day.
But not easily. I mean, it took, there was battle all day and through a dark night of doubt.
Yeah.
They didn't know whether they were going to be able to be victorious here. This was a really tough fight.
This is a tough battle. This was not just coming through and just, slaying.
These were not perishing like straw in a great fire. These were tough fights.
Yeah.
The dragon host, and these are winged dragons now. So going back to that question out of Bartleman's bag, now we know why.
Yeah.
Smaug
why
wasn't
there were no winged dragons at Gondolin, right?
They were all being saved for this particular battle.
Yep.
My goodness.
And then just imagine the visual of Eärendil's white ship flying and Calagon the Black.
With the golden oars and the silver sails and this black dragon.
Well, yes, and the two of them fighting. And there are some pictures of it online. There's some art out there.
Yeah, we should talk about that.
But I think we need to talk about that because I think that gives us kind of a skewed view of Ancalagon, doesn't it?
It really does. There's a graphic going out that's a well-made graphic, but it's I think frankly not realistic in terms of trying to describe the size of Ancalagon. Mm-hmm. You'll see these things where they've got like silhouettes of the various dragons of Middle-earth, and you'll have little teeny tiny Glaurung and Skatha and maybe a slightly little bigger Smaug, and then you'll have this massive, planetoid-sized dragon, Ancalagon that would make King Kong look, like
ridiculously,
like a lemur.
Ridiculously huge.
Absurdly huge.
Yeah.
And they get this from this notion of, he fell upon the towers of these big mountains and they were broken.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
well, we've talked about this. I mean, we talked about Thangorodrim when Morgoth built it,
right?
Didn't we? And we talked about the fact that, they're referred to as the peaks or the towers, but they're also
and they're big.
They're big, but they were piles of trash and slag,
ash and slag. They just couldn't have been. I mean, I see. Part of this is I love Karen Wynne Fonstad's Atlas of Middle-earth, but there's something that she draws a conclusion. She draws the conclusion in there that the peaks of Thangorodrim were like 30,000 feet high or 36,000 feet high or something, basically higher than any terrestrial mountain.
Yeah, I remember reading that.
I can't possibly land on that conclusion because they were just made with the refuse from the tunnelings. So.
And even if these were
36,000 foot mountains,
if it's mythically possible for Morgoth to create something this big,
right? Even if that were the case, just because it says they were broken in his ruin doesn't mean the entire mountains were destroyed from top to bottom.
Right. I think that really is
the sides of the mountain were broken in his ruin. I mean, Gandalf says the same thing about he smote the mountainside in his ruin, talking about the Balrog that he fights with. Yeah, he breaks a part of the mountains off. Okay. Yeah. That doesn't mean that the entire towers are destroyed.
Or shattered and thrown down. Exactly.
There's a great article that, frankly, I had been intending to read pieces from, but we're already, I don't know, what are we, close to an hour and a half, and I want to make sure we get to the end of this story. But we'll make sure we include a link to this in our show notes. There's a great article that John Garth wrote back in January of 2015, talking about this exact issue. And he really goes into a number of reasons why why we can't take this description and run with it literally. And he goes through, there's at least three different things. It's a really great article, and it talks about some of the illustrations that Tolkien used and how they were in a different art style and how you can't take scale seriously in those images. Talking about medieval art, the picture of Glorhun sets forth the Seek Turin is the one that I'm thinking of. So we'll provide the link for that. And it's interesting because
definitely read that.
That's such a key article, and yet, hey, conveniently enough, we're interviewing John Garth in our next episode. So,
yes, we are.
So we will post that link to our show notes. Please read that as sort of a postscript to this article, to this episode in dealing with the size of Ancalagon. But
he was big. He was no doubt about it.
He was bigger
and
than Smaug and bigger than Glaurung.
He was the biggest dragon we've yet seen, and the biggest dragon we will see. But don't. Yeah, he's not like 1,000 times bigger than Smaug or whatever. That
he'd have his own gravity well. I mean,
it's
just, there's no physical way for him to fly.
Well, that's true. Yeah,
I mean, seriously, he's big enough to crush 36,000-foot mountains. He's too big to fly.
I mean, look, hey, I am the biggest Eärendil fan I know, but I mean, he's just a dude in a ship against a dragon that big
with a bright light.
Right. I mean, come on. So he's got to be small enough for somebody to contend with at least.
Yeah. I mean,
but interesting point. And I mean, I think one of the things Garth mentions, I definitely want people to read that. But one of the things Garth mentions is just about the fact that these are myths and they are
this is poetic. This is poetic speech in a
exactly. Stylistic, I think, was one of the words he used in one place. I think that's a really good word. It's meant to illustrate something poetically, as opposed to being, this is not intended as scientific fact.
This isn't exactly. This isn't a crisp, pure narrative. This is a legend. It's a retelling of a legend. So anyway.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish that paragraph because justice. Then the sun rose, and the host of the Valar prevailed, and well nigh all the dragons were destroyed, and all the pits of Morgoth were broken and unroofed, and the might of the Valar descended into the deeps of the earth. There Morgoth stood at last at bay, and yet unvaliant. He fled into the deepest of his mines, and sued for peace and pardon. But his feet were hewn from under him, and he was hurled upon his face. Then he was bound with the chain Angainor, which he had worn aforetime, and his iron crown they beat into a collar for his neck, and his head was bowed upon his knees. And the 2 Silmarils, which remained to Morgoth, were taken from his crown, and they shone unsullied beneath the sky, and Eonwe took them and guarded them. Yes.
I think everyone needs to know that that's the passage that I bought those other passages with.
Yes. You paid a very steep price.
and I gave it willingly. Yea, with both hands.
Yea, with both hands thou shalt give. I hunger
that is such a great passage.
Yes, it is. It is a great passage. The cowardice of Morgoth, the visual of the entire, just the pits broken and unroofed, the entire top of all of Angband. I mean, sorry, of all of of Angband. I wanted to say Autumno for a moment. Wait a minute, wrong age.
You just see them ripping off the
chunks of land,
the ground, big to reveal these dungeons below. Yeah,
it's like. Oh, it's almost like when you're a kid and you have an ant colony, and you realize just how powerful you are in relation to these ants. Kind of makes me think of that. So then he gets the chain Angainori around him again. So
yes, and we saw that chain.
Yep.
Wow, long time ago.
Long time ago, way back when.
Yeah.
My goodness, chapter 3 maybe. I don't know.
Something. Yeah, because it was when the elves were about to show up. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
I've got it written down right here, page 51.
Yeah, that's chapter 3, the captivity of Melkor.
Yeah.
And I love
they beat his crown into a collar. That is brilliant. I love awesome. That is so awesome. Poetic justice.
I could just see this visual of him, his head bowed upon his knees. He's just He's beaten.
Well, and remember how heavy the crown was, and remember how just the weight of the crown on his head was weighing him down. I can't remember where we saw that. But
that was in the chapter with Luthien. I was talking about how much that thing weighed. Oh no, I know what you're talking about.
I think it was weight. There, but it was also
It was when he first put the Silmarils in it. It was after his. That's right. After he and Ungoliant, after their date ended poorly.
Right.
That was. So that would have been.
That's right.
Not of the Darkening of Valinor, because it was in the pickup of the next chapter. So it was chapter 9 of the Flight of the Noldor.
Right. Okay.
Where we got that.
And now that heavy thing is around his neck.
Collar. Beautiful.
Oh, so great.
And no more Silmarils. Eowyn has them.
Silmarils.
Nope. Love it. And they shone unsullied beneath the sky. So we won't read the next paragraph, but basically the entire realm is destroyed. Slaves come forth, but the world has changed. The sea is coming in places. The rivers are changing or finding new paths. And Sirion is gone. Yeah. I mean, the entire river Sirion is gone.
Finally, it's not a spoiler when we talk about Beleriand going underwater.
And yet I have to think this must be at least a partial, or not a partial, but not an immediate collapse, because, later we get that they build ships and they, some people
leave. True, yeah.
Well, if the shoreline's not there, where are they building these things?
Where are they building ships?
I think this must be some sort of slow descent. This isn't quite like as cataclysmic as what we'll see in a Calabath, for instance.
Right. This is I think you're probably right. This is slower, and of course the Valar are there, so they should have some ability to check the sinking.
Yeah, there has to be, because there's got to be time for a lot of this post-battle stuff to happen.
Right, and for anybody who's reading this for the first time, this is what creates the shoreline of Middle Earth that you see in Lord of the Rings. That map where the Eärendil and Elwing, which was the eastern edge of Beleriand, is now the western edge of Middle Earth, and there's just that little strip of land called Lindon, which is west of those mountains. Left. It's all that's left of Beleriand, and this is when that happens.
Part of Osiriand.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
I think we determined that one of the rivers became the Gulf of Lune there, didn't we?
I can't remember which one. I think we figured out we couldn't really tell which one had become the Gulf of Lune, because there was no reference to where. We would have had to have a reference of at least maybe where the Dwarven kingdoms were.
Right.
To kind of gauge which river had become it probably was 2 or 3 of them that kind of merged.
Could be, they just merged.
So
interesting.
So I'm going to have you pick up the next, paragraph and a half or so, and then we'll take it from there.
Okay. Then Eärendil, as herald of the elder king, summoned the elves of Beleriand to depart from Middle-earth. But Maedhros and Maglor would not hearken, and they prepared, though now with weariness and loathing, to attempt in despair the fulfillment of their oath. For they would have given battle for the Silmarils were they withheld, even against the victorious host of Valinor, even though they stood alone against all the world. And they sent a message, therefore, to Eärendil, bidding him yield up now those jewels, which of old Fëanor their father made, and Morgoth stole from him. But Eärendil answered that the right to the work of their father, which the sons of Fëanor formerly possessed, had now perished, because of their many and merciless deeds, being blinded by their oath, and most of all because of their slaying of Dior and the assault upon the havens. The light of the Silmarils should go now into the west, whence it came in the beginning, and to Valinor must Maedhros and Maglor return, and there abide the judgment of the Valar, by whose decree alone would Eärendil yield the jewels from his charge.
Yeah, that's a no.
We are disinclined to acquiesce to your request.
Oh, you got to do that with the right voice.
I can't do a Jeffrey Rush voice.
Acquiesce to your request.
It's too late for a Jeffrey Rush voice. I'm sorry. I think
they're more like guidelines.
There you go.
You got it. I missed that movie.
Than actual rules. Well, there's a new one coming.
Yeah, I know, but
I know that none of them has been as good as the first.
Well, and the fourth one was just so bad. I can't even. I mean, really terrible bad.
I don't think I made it through the fourth one. I'm not sure I made it through the third one.
I barely did. I didn't walk out of
Pirates.
Of Pirates 4. But that was the one where I think they were looking for the Fountain of Youth. Oh, it was just awful.
Okay.
I'm so sorry to say that, but
I haven't even seen it.
But yeah, I mean, 2 2 was just almost as good as 1. 3 was not quite as good as 2, and 4 was terrible. So if it continues that pattern, 5 will be absolutely ridiculously bad. But I don't know. Maybe it'll be good. I hope so. I certainly love the first one. The first one was a blast.
Well, Legolas is back in this one, so.
Legolas is back.
Isn't he?
Yeah, no, I know, but I'm just like, Legolas.
I know.
You're right. That's all I can think of. Part of the ship, part of the crew.
Yep.
Anyway. So, we digress. That's exactly right. Oh my goodness, do we digress?
With my bad Barbarossa, not even impression, just quote.
But that's good enough. Yeah, this is definitely a big, big, big no. But I love it that Eärendil doesn't just say, "You're kidding me, right?" I mean, he would totally be okay to say that. But he says basically, you did have this right. But you don't have it anymore. He comes at him
like, he puts a little lawyer on him. Like
he does. He lawyers up for sure.
Well, you formally possessed that right.
Yes,
but
let's go through the list of things that have taken that away from you.
Right, exactly.
And what's going to happen. So, and I love this. Look, you want the Silmarils? Come on back to Valinor. Because maybe the Valar will give them to you, but
maybe
they're going to have
to. You never know.
They're going to have to tell me.
Anything could happen.
Oh man.
Yeah.
So they. I love that argument. Now we have to skip some because otherwise this will be a 4-hour episode, and we don't want that. I know some of you do. You're sick people. Get help. No, we love you. We do.
We do love you. We love every one of you. But
that was sarcasm. Yeah, just so
we can't make every one of these things 3 hours.
No, we can't. We really can't. So they have this argument between them. Maglor wants to agree. Look, I'm all for that. The oath says we can bide our time. Let's go back to Valinor. Maybe we'll get the Silmarils back. Mylor's like, look, if we go back, we can't get. What's going to happen to us if we try to fight the Valar in Valinor? Duh.
Right. Yeah. Because Maedhros is he's just taking it as a given that, well, look, the oath is still there. We have to do this. We are trying to do it.
Oath bound to keep trying to get these.
Yeah.
But Maglor's like, no. Look, if they won't let us fulfill our oath, isn't it void? I mean, he's trying to get all lawyery on us now, right?
Oh, he's looking for a way out. I
got to find a loophole,
Yeah.
But Maedhros makes the very good point. Look, we called the everlasting darkness upon us, so we got to do this.
Yeah. And you see here, Maedhros says we swore to Iluvatar we swore in our madness.
Boy, that's a good catch, isn't it?
Both of them know that this is
madness. This is stupid.
This is insane at this point.
Thanks a lot, Dad.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, really.
And Maglor's really looking for a way out, but Maedhros
doesn't think there is one. Yeah.
Doesn't think there's one. Maybe it's just despair at this point for him. He's just.
Yeah. I mean, I think they know they'll die if they do it. I mean, that's what he's imagining.
But then again, that takes you back to Maglor, who says, well, then let's just break the oath, because at least that way we'll do less damage.
Right. Either way, we're hosed. But if we don't take them, then at least we're going to do less evil.
Let's at least not take anybody else down with us at this point.
Seriously, we've already killed enough. Can we stop killing?
Yeah.
But the answer is no.
The answer to that is no.
And I'm going to read the next couple of paragraphs here, actually the next 3 paragraphs. Yet he yielded at last to the will of Maedhros, and they took counsel together how they should lay hands on the Silmarils. And they disguised themselves, and came in the night to the camp of Eärendil, and crept into the place where the Silmarils were guarded, and they slew the guards, and laid hands on the jewels. Then all the camp was raised against them, and they prepared to die, defending themselves unto the last. But Eärendil would not permit the slaying of the sons of Fëanor, and departing unfought, they fled far away. Each of them took to himself a Silmaril, for they said, since one is lost to us, and but 2 remain, and we 2 alone of our brothers, so is it plain that fate would have us share the heirlooms of our father. But the jewel burned the hand of Maedhros in pain unbearable, and he perceived that it was as Eärendil had said, and that his right thereto had become void, and that the oath was vain. And being in anguish and despair, he cast himself into a gaping chasm filled with fire, and so ended. And the Silmaril that he bore was taken into the bosom of the earth. And it is told of Maglor that he could not endure the pain with which the Silmaril tormented him, and he cast it at last into the sea, and thereafter he wandered ever upon the shores, singing in pain and regret beside the waves. For Maglor was mighty among the singers of old, named only after Eärendil of Doriath. But he came never back among the people of the elves. And thus it came to pass that the Silmarils found their long homes, one in the airs of heaven, and one in the fires of the heart of the world, and one in the deep waters. Just
wow. It's amazing. It's there. I feel like that passage. It's pretty on the surface what's happening there.
Yeah,
maybe we don't have to, but I think we need to react to a couple of things in here.
We do.
First of all, can we go back to them killing the guards?
Yeah.
Isn't this a fourth kinslaying?
Yeah, it's just they only killed those few guards. I mean, this wasn't like they wiped out an entire, community.
Okay, yeah,
this is more
fair.
like, murder.
Okay,
full-blown kinslaying.
Just a little murder. Yeah,
just
you're right.
Murder. Yeah,
but I mean, these are elves.
That's the thing.
So,
presumably. I doubt they're Maiar.
Right.
I don't think you could slay them.
Can't imagine they could slay Maiar.
No. And, you almost wonder, who were the guards? Were these some of the Noldor, or were these Vanyar? Probably Vanyar. I don't
Probably
think
Vanyar. I can't imagine they would trust the Noldor anywhere near them.
Hey, Fox, could you guard the hens?
No. Yeah, right. Exactly. But yeah, so... Wow. And they're thinking, well, there's two of us, and there's two gems.
Right.
So...
And I love Eonway's sense of justice.
Yeah.
He knows better.
Oh.
You don't have to kill these guys. Trust me.
Yeah.
This is a fate worse than death.
Yeah.
Plus, of course,
true.
fate, period. I mean, I think there's something to be said here of Eonway. Even if he didn't know that he was supposed to let them go specifically, that is to say, if he didn't know why, I think there was something behind his deciding not to fight them for it.
Maybe just some echo of the music in him that was kind of telling him, I can't, we can't intervene.
I doubt Manwë told him, hey, by the way, I mean, it's possible.
Just in case
the
Sons of Feanor,
Right. But it is, so they both, of course, experience this great pain. And, we talked about this way back when we learned about the Silmarils and their hallowing.
The unclean hands.
Exactly. Yep. This is indication that they have unclean hands or an evil will. So their right to these...
And so their right is void.
Is gone.
And the oath is vain. I love that.
I do too.
As if we didn't know how vain the oath was all along.
But not void. Not void,
not
but vain.
Void. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
The right is void, not the oath. And that's...
Right.
That language isn't an accident, but you're right. This oath has been in vain from the minute it was taken. The minute it was made, it was in vain. Because you just can't possibly do this thing. Like they said to Feanor, even if Eru had made you 3 times as powerful as you are, you could not do this thing.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
Maedhros throws himself into a chasm of fire. And notice, though, anguish and despair. Finally, there's the despair. We've talked about hope and despair before. There is no hope anymore for him.
Yeah.
None. And so
this is the only thing he's been living for.
Yeah.
And it's, he doesn't even have that anymore.
No.
But what else do you do?
He can't possess the one thing that he has been dreaming to possess.
Right. That he's killed so many for.
Yeah.
Despite being sick with this oath, he's continued. And now he realizes, oh, yeah, my right really is void.
My goodness. So he throws himself into that fire. That Silmaril goes to the bosom of the earth. Oh, pardon me.
Yeah.
So sorry. My goodness.
But Maglor.
Yeah, Maglor.
I love Maglor.
Yeah, Maglor doesn't kill himself. He just gets rid of the Silmaril.
Yeah.
And then, of course, he wanders the shores singing, never to come back.
Singing in pain and regret. And I like to think he's still out there somewhere.
Well, he writes... Yeah, he writes depressing songs, but, he never hits number 1 because of Eärendil of Doriath. He's sort of...
Right, exactly. Yeah, right. Yeah, maybe Maglor is just a little too depressing to go mainstream,
He's really goth.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's sad.
So cool.
Wouldn't it be interesting to think of Maglor still being out there?
Yeah. I've had my theories about what popular artist he is today.
Elvis Presley?
No, I never went that way. I always kind of...
Well, because he's mysterious and people still see him at Walmarts across the country.
Yeah, and we swear he's still alive. Yeah, no, I was... I don't know, I always kind of thought like maybe Brian Wilson or something.
Oh, there you go.
West Coaster, you know, a lot of brothers.
Beach, a lot of brothers. Oh, man. I like that idea. He's mighty among the singers of old. Never came back. Yeah. So now we get the wrap-up.
Him throwing the Silmaril, though, is great. There's that great. It's the cover of one of the editions of the Silmaril.
Yes.
Silmarillion. Is it Ted Naismith?
I believe it is.
Who did it?
Of him throwing it into the. You can see it.
Yeah.
His arms extended, and the Silmaril is out in the, out over the waves.
Yeah.
Is that the image you're thinking of? Yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of. And I think that's Naismith.
We'll have to see if we can find that image and put it in our show notes. Well,
I'll
make a note.
I'll see if I can find that while you're. It's him. I've got it up on my screen right now. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful.
Isn't that a great image? I mean, I can see it in my head, so I'm not pulling it up right now. But I love that now we get the destination for all three of the Silmarils. Mm-hmm. That you get, now you get one in the skies, one in the earth, and one in the waters. Mm-hmm. But that brings us to a real brief conversation I want to have, and I say I want it to be brief because we are pushing pretty close to 2 hours now. And that is this question, and we see this every once in a while on the internets. The idea that the Arkenstone is in fact a Silmaril, that it's the Silmaril that Maedhros took with him when he jumped into the chasm of fire.
Into the bosom of the fire. Yeah,
right. You did a little bit of research in the history of the Hobbit on this. I know we're not from John Rateliff. Do you want to tell us a little bit kind of where did he land on this?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, this is something that we've seen it a lot, and I've always just sort of discounted it out of hand. After reading Rateliff's bit on it, he's actually got about 7 pages on it in the history of the Hobbit. And he actually is a little bit more open to the idea that maybe there was something there at one point. Okay. Or maybe that Tolkien had intended for there to be some sort of connection, but connection doesn't necessarily mean it's the same jewel. Yeah.
Right.
Not that it's actually it, but that Tolkien wanted to draw a connection.
Okay.
But I think where Rateliff lands on all this is that it's ultimately ambiguous. He actually says at one point in this 7-page essay, the answer is both yes and no.
Don't ask him or the elves, apparently.
Right, exactly. Go not to the Rateliff for counsel. But what it really gets down to is this, and I will read just a few lines of this.
Sure. I think this is helpful.
Because there is a little bit of an etymological connection here. So the word Arkenstone comes from this Old English word Erkunstan, which actually means something like holy jewel or holy stone.
Right.
And so here's what Rateliff says. By avoiding the use of the word Silmaril and instead using the ingenious and agreeable synonym Arkenstone, or Erkunstan, Tolkien got to draw on his rich homebrew mythology, which by the early 1930s had developed a remarkable depth and sophistication, without worrying what the effect of this new story would be on that mythology. Okay. And if I could put that in my own words, what I would say is that yes, there is a connection there. There is even an etymological connection there that I don't think we have time to go into. But ultimately, what it boils down to is that Tolkien used his own mythology as a source of inspiration.
Right. That makes sense.
Just as you could say that, Turin was inspired by Kullervo without actually being Kullervo, the Arkenstone was inspired by the Silmarils without actually being a Silmaril.
Yeah.
That's where I'm landing on this.
That makes sense. And that makes sense because the published texts make it, and we've talked about this before, that when there's an issue, when there's possible conflict, we really have to go with the published text. We can't
absolutely.
If something in Book of Lost Tales Volume 2, contradicts something in Lord of the Rings, we've got to go with what's in Lord of the Rings. That's the published text. So that's why those other things aren't published, because he could never reconcile them. He was not, or at least not able to in his lifetime. And the published text makes it abundantly clear that they cannot possibly be the same stone. The Silmarillion says that the world is, we're going to get to this line a little bit, so spoiler, the world's going to have to be broken and remade for the Silmarils to be recovered.
Right.
And the Hobbit, as they describe the Arkenstone, it says that there could not be two such gems, even in so marvelous a hoard, even in all the world. Okay, well,
I guess there can't be three.
There can't be three of them.
Yeah. Right.
And then, of course, I think the biggest and most obvious one is the fact that in the Hobbit it says that the Arkenstone was cut and fashioned by the dwarves.
Yes.
That's
the big one.
Absolutely eliminates this. We know that the no violence could mar or break the Silmarils. That's straight out of chapter 7. There is no way that anybody could have cut or fashioned these stones. Second, they would have had to touch them in order to cut and fashion them.
Right.
And they are not of immortal. They're not any of those. They are mortal flesh.
They have less right to it than Maglor and Maedhros at this point. Really.
Right. They are mortal flesh, and so they could not touch it, but be scorched and withered after those stones have been hallowed. So that's really why we have to land there and say there's really just no way at all.
Yeah. And even the beauty of these 3 long homes that they found, heaven and earth and water, where the Silmarils have all landed.
To have one of those come back?
To have one of them suddenly come up just because, Thorin and Bilbo came back to the Lonely Mountain, or because the dwarves found it in the first place.
Talk about a long way for that stone to go. There's just no way.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Yeah. There's just no practical way.
Yeah, and sometimes, maybe that was the volcanic chasm at the bottom of Erebor or something, but that's a long way from Maedhros to have run in unbearable pain.
From a part of Beleriand that's being destroyed.
And remember what that stone did to Karkaroth. Getting from Angband to Doriath.
Right.
Burned him from the inside out. I mean, there's no way Maedhros could have made it that far. And
no.
Yeah, I mean. So yes, similarities I think that are
Bilbo
intentional.
touches it, and
what is it? He hands it to
Bard, right?
Yeah.
So, and both of those are mortal flesh.
Yeah.
So no.
Yeah. No, it can't be based on the finished texts, and that's what we have to go with. It cannot be. Yes, read Rateliff. I will acknowledge that there is a connection. There are.
But it's an etymological connection. It's a connection in terms of inspiration and use of words. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Tolkien certainly intended for there to be a very subtle, and I mean very subtle, connection between the two.
Mm-hmm.
A connection. Yeah, the reason why we have never seen this, the reason why we've always dismissed out of hand the arguments on the internet is because none of them have ever made out this point. I've never seen anybody on Facebook use Eorknenstan.
Right.
in any of these discussions ever, not once.
No.
Anyway, fun stuff. It would have been nice if you had thought it was and I thought it wasn't, because I know our listeners
I know we need to argue
want
more,
us to disagree. Can you please pick something? Can you pick something to be wrong on, Shawn?
No.
All right. Well, if you can't do that,
I will be wrong on this podcast. Would be better if we disagreed more.
There you go. If you can't do that, can you at least read the next 2 paragraphs for us?
I suppose I can do that. Yeah.
All right. Sounds good.
In those days there was a great building of ships upon the shores of the western sea, and thence in many a fleet the Eldar set sail into the west, and came never back to the lands of weeping and of war. And the Vanyar returned beneath their white banners, and were borne in triumph to Valinor. But their joy in victory was diminished, for they returned without the Silmarils from Morgoth's crown. And they knew that those jewels could not be found or brought together again unless the world be broken and remade. And when they came into the west, the elves of Beleriand dwelt upon Toleracia, the lonely isle that looks both west and east, whence they might come even to Valinor. They were admitted again to the love of Manwë and the pardon of the Valar, and the Teleri forgave their ancient grief, and the curse was laid to rest.
I love that. The forgiveness of the Teleri.
Yeah.
To me, that speaks even more than the pardon of the Valar. There's something
I think so. Yeah.
really noble about that. Just a few pages ago, they were still so ticked that they weren't going to set foot on Middle Earth to help them.
Yeah, right.
And now they forgive them. I love that. That's beautiful.
Yeah. But sad that, even though that this is a victory, it is a diminished.
It's very diminished without those gems.
Without those gems, and because, again, the misdeeds of the Feanorians at the end.
I mean, they would have at least had 2 of them.
Yeah. Even at the end, they prevent the host of the West from having a true victory.
It really is sad. I mean, there's not a whole lot more to be said. It's but it's important stuff, and we needed to read that. Obviously, the world broken and remade is important. And then the fact that they're back and everything's forgiven, and I think everything can be forgiven because the 7 sons of Feanor are dead. Well, Maglor's not dead, but he didn't come back. So
right, and the Silmarils are
Yeah,
they're not a
they're
factor
unachievable now. We can't.
Yeah.
We can't.
Right.
It's not even something we can plan. Try to get them back.
Right.
We're not going to read the next paragraph, but we are going to kind of sum up again that not everybody left. As we know, a few people stayed. Círdan, Celeborn, and Galadriel. They are the only. Galadriel is the only one of the Noldor who went into exile to stay there. Alone remained
Or
of
the
those
only one
who led the
the
Noldor.
one who led the Noldor.
Sorry,
yeah,
my mistake. So that's
because as we know, there are
of course going to be others, but of the leaders, she was the only one.
Right. Yeah.
There have to be others because they're not like living by themselves in caves. They have communities with them.
Right. Well, we get things like Gildor Inglorian in Fellowship, of the House of Finrod. So
definitely
he must have been around
Noldor.
for a long time.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you've got Gil-galad who remains, and then Elrond who chose. This is where we get their choice, right? We talked earlier about the choice of Eärendil and Elwing and how he deferred to Elwing, and when she chose to be counted among elvenkind, he did too. Their sons, however, choose different. Elrond
they each have their own choice. Yeah.
Yeah, each of them has their own, as is allowed. That was something that Manwë made very specific. So Elrond chooses to be numbered among the Eldar, but Elros chooses to be with men.
I wish I knew more about this. I wish I
too.
knew more about the choices they made.
Yeah, and why did they make those choices?
Yeah.
What was their thought process? Why, if they're brothers and close, why would they choose to be parted?
Right.
And yet, it's a good thing they
maybe
did.
Or maybe Elros was just like, okay, he's going to be an elf. I'm going to leave.
That's right.
I can't stand that guy.
I was going to pick elf, but man, forget it.
Yeah. No, I cannot live another day with Elrond.
I'm tired of living under his shadow.
Yeah.
Anyway.
He's always scowling.
Seriously, he's always...
He's always scowling and holding councils and
seriously
reading moon runes. What's wrong with that guy?
He keeps talking about the Matrix. I don't understand. What's the Matrix?
Okay, mixing properties is supposed to be my thing.
Welcome
great.
to the Matrix, Frodo Baggins. Okay, I'm sorry. I do want to touch though on their bloodlines because the text makes it real clear that from these two brothers has come this ennoblement of men, right? The blood of the firstborn and the strain. I love this. The strain of the spirits divine that were before Arda.
Yes.
So we talked before about their bloodline and how each of these is. Let me get those numbers again. I have to get back to that part, but they're each basically 2/3 elf, 31% man, and 3% Maiar, and that's big. That's significant. Elrond's descendants are okay. We know about Elros. Well, actually, we know about Elrond too. I'm going to cover each real briefly. Elros, as we know, and we'll see in the next chapter, becomes the first king of Numenor. He ends up reigning for over 400 years, so he has a very, very long life.
Wow, is it that long? That is a long time.
410 years, I think it is.
Wow.
We'll get to that, very early in our next. Well, not our next episode, because our next episode is the interview with John Garth, but our next story episode.
Right.
But Elrond's descendants, and we don't get this in the films. If most of your experience of Lord of the Rings is the films, you won't remember this. But, we all know about his daughter, Arwen, of course. She ends up marrying Aragorn. But his twin sons, Elladan and Elrohir, are very close to the Rangers of the North. They're often far afield with the Rangers of the North. They come with Halbarad and 30 Rangers to join Aragorn before they enter the Paths of the Dead.
That's right.
They bring, one of them actually has the gift from Arwen that is the banner that Aragorn ends up unfurling on the boats that they take.
Right.
Yeah. So, they're really tied in. And those bloodlines, they end up coming back together, of course, in Aragorn and Arwen. As we know, Arwen is the daughter of Elrond. Aragorn is descended from Elros by, 40 or 50 generations. But that's the difference between
I think
men
it's
and
60-something.
elves.
Yeah,
it's
a lot.
It's a lot. And it's not direct. It's not male to male to male. I think he's descended from a daughter at a couple of points. But, we'll get into that when we get into Akalabeth and how the king and queenship, gets descended. But very important to note that this is how this whole line that we've been dealing with for this whole time of Tuor and Idril and of Beren and Luthien and then of their kids, and then finally Eärendil marrying Elwing, and now you've got Elrond and Elros. That's what this is all about, was ennobling
This is the ennobling we've talked about several times now. Yeah,
and bringing in that strain of Maiar into Elrond and into Elros, especially into Elros, because of course Elrond being counted among the elves. So just amazing.
And that's who we're going to see, kind of the movers and shakers of the rest of the legendarium, really. But
absolutely, and we can't wait to get to that. But for now, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this chapter. I'm going to go ahead and finish it off, and then we'll discuss. My goodness, we're already over 2 hours. I'm so sorry. Thank you for your patience. But let me go ahead and pick up this last little bit. But Morgoth himself, the Valar, thrust through the door of night beyond the walls of the world into the timeless void. And a guard is set forever on those walls, and Eärendil keeps watch upon the ramparts of the sky. Yet the lies that Melkor, the mighty and accursed, Morgoth Bauglir, the power of terror and of hate, sowed in the hearts of elves and men, are a seed that does not die and cannot be destroyed. And ever and anon it sprouts anew, and will bear dark fruit even unto the latest days. Here ends the Silmarillion. If it has passed from the high and the beautiful to darkness and ruin, that was of old the fate of Arda Mard. And if any change shall come, and the marring be amended, Manwë and Varda may know, but they have not revealed it, and it is not declared in the dooms of Mandos.
Wow. It's a sad ending. I mean, it's a sad ending with some hope. We've got the star of hope in the sky.
Exactly. There's this beautiful moment, of the star, and yet we're reminded that even though Melkor is defeated, the hate that he has sown, the lies that he has sown, that will not ever die. Yeah. And cannot be destroyed. This is now a permanently fallen world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. This bit reminds me of Gandalf's words at the last debate in Return of the King, where they're talking about what will happen after they overthrow Sauron. He says,
right, I remember this.
Yeah, he says, other evils there are that may come, for Sauron is himself but a servant or emissary. Yet it is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. What weather they shall have is not ours to rule.
Boy, I love that. What a beautiful metaphor
I do love that.
Uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so those who live may have clean earth to till. What weather they'll have isn't ours to rule.
Yeah. I mean, it echoes a little bit with, one of those all-time favorite Gandalf quotes, all we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us.
You're right. That really is that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Except here he's saying it's not just that it's ours to decide what to do, it's that ours is to do the right thing.
Do the right thing for now. Uproot this evil that we can. And it will not be forever. There will always be this evil in the world, and it is because of Morgoth.
That's something we're going to get into when we get to The Lord of the Rings and maybe even to The Hobbit, but this reminder that we see throughout Tolkien that victories are temporary. Mm-hmm. Every victory is temporary.
Every victory is temporary. That's a really
I think that's something that the films, we'll talk more about the films in a few episodes, and you know that I really did enjoy the first three, but it is something that the films didn't capture, that they kind of glossed that and made it seem like, I don't know. Yeah. It felt like, we're done. It's all happy now.
Right, exactly. It's the happy ending, and it's,
But it's the cliched happy ending, not the catastrophe, and not the understanding.
That's true.
That, in all of this, these victories are temporary because of what we just read in that very last chapter. That's the fate of Arda Mard. Yep. Arda is Mard. Arda is not as it was intended to be. You talked about those lines being, that reminded you of those lines. I actually was thinking of that line way back in chapter 7. And this is back when Melkor was trying to sow discord. Track number 1 on his greatest hits album.
Yes, yep.
Amongst the elves, and the text says that long was Melkor at work, and slow at first, and barren was his labor. But he that sows lies, in the end shall not lack of a harvest, and soon he may rest from toil indeed, while others reap and sow in his stead. Lies will come. They will bear fruit. But in this case, as we see, is it lies always will. It's dark fruit.
Yeah. Well, and you've got the image of the hate, the power of terror and hate sowed in the hearts of elves and men. Yeah, this image of the seed and being sowed. Yeah, it's
the lies.
A very clear parallel. Yeah. Right.
It's sad, but there is a tinge of hope at the end that possibly, just possibly, there's going to be change that comes. We I don't know, at some point we may talk about. Oh, well, goodness, am I yawning again?
It's late.
You're boring me, Shawn. You're boring me.
I know, and I'm on Eärendil adrenaline right now. Eärendil.
Oh, wow, that's bad.
Thank you. That's horrible. Sorry.
That's terrible.
But there is that hope, and I love that. All this horrible stuff has happened, but we've gotten something that we could not have expected, which is the star of hope in the sky that will continue to shine.
Absolutely.
And yes, I'm taking it right back to Eärendil because it
needs to.
That star is going to continue to shine in the sky, and it's even today we can look up in the sky and we can look at the evening star, the morning star, and and frankly, that's what I do when I look up at the evening star. I think of this story and I think of hope.
It's hard not to.
And that's a beautiful thing to me.
Man, it really is. Wow.
So, but I guess.
Yeah.
This is it. I mean, here ends the Silmarillion, the Quenta Silmarillion, we should say. And it only took us 15 months.
That's about right. We started the Quenta with episode 8. It took us a while to get there.
Wow.
And that released on April 10th last year. I was looking this up. This is episode 43, which releases on June 4th. So, it's 15 months, a little shy. And it's 31 episodes, not counting because I don't want to count our specials or our interviews.
Sure, yeah.
Counting only the chapters of the Quenta Silmarillion, we've done 31 episodes over 15 months, and we have spent over 55 hours walking you through the Silmarillion.
Plus another 2.5. This one's going to...
No, I assume this is going to be 2.
Did you include this one? All right,
included this as 2, so maybe it's closer to 56 now.
Good for you. And we hope you have enjoyed it. And the good news is we're not done with the book. We're not even done with the Quenta yet, because I think, I just want to say briefly, I feel like I need to explain my obsession with Eärendil. And I think it's just, in a way, you can see the entire Quenta as just the origin story for this Star of Hope.
Yeah.
And that is, it's a bit of an oversimplification, but I don't think it's really inaccurate when you look at from the entry of the Ainur into Arda, the creation of the trees, the creation of the Silmarils, the ennoblement of men through all these marriages we've talked about, leading to Eärendil and Elwing and the journey. And as you said earlier, even something as sad and pointless as Turin's story tells us part of that, tells us how the Nauglamir came to Thingol, and that started that chain reaction that resulted in the Silmaril coming into Elwing's hands.
You're right. Folks, Shawn's right. He's not just being Eärendil-centric.
For once. And I really, I always think of Eärendil as like a nexus point for the mythology.
Good point.
The first age is, you can almost see it as like an hourglass-shaped diagram. The first age leads up to his story, and then his story, as he discussed with Elrond and Elros, sets up the major events of the second age, and then his descendants are the major players in the third. And you know that. No, that's not a spoiler. You guys know this by now. You know what's going to happen.
You're not listening to this.
Elrond, Elrond and Aragorn and things like that. This all starts here.
Yep. Yeah, it really does. But let's look back at how Eärendil's story closes out the first age. We talked about this a moment ago. He becomes Gil Estel, the star of high hope. That hope rises from the destruction of Beleriand by Morgoth, this corruption of this beautiful land. Eärendil's story is this story of hope. We've talked about this coming from horror of, well, let's just be honest. It's the sudden happy ending that could not have been counted on. It is the eucatastrophe. We've avoided that word because I think we wanted to include that here in the conclusion. That's what this is. This is that thing that could only have happened because it was part of the plan. You could never have counted on it to happen, and you can't count on it to happen again. It's the eucatastrophe. As much evil as there is in this world that Morgoth has marred, and there is a lot, hope still rises. That's profound.
Yes,
not just
absolutely.
Yeah, it's theologically profound. It's profound even just for the sake of kind of a pure human optimism. And, that really makes me come back to the very beginning. That's why you and I wanted to start this whole podcast with On Fairy Stories.
On Fairy Stories, yeah.
Because this concept, this idea of eucatastrophe, it's so central to Tolkien's works that an understanding of what it is and the role that it plays in fantasy, at least again in Tolkien's view, is absolutely crucial. Absolutely.
Yeah, it really is. And on that subject of eucatastrophe, I think this reminds me of something that one of our listeners sent us recently. Tom Hillman, who's one of our listeners, who's we've heard from quite a few times.
The brilliant Balrog essay.
Yes, the brilliant Balrog essay, and he's been really vocal participant in a lot of our social media stuff. But he has a blog, and he recently wrote a really great essay about this on his blog. It's called "From Terrible Beauty to Beacon of Hope: The Silmarils from Feanor to Eärendil."
Oh yeah, I read that.
Oh, it is so good. I mean,
really good.
Yeah, I mean, he basically has broken down how Eärendil's story is a kind of redemption for the Silmarils themselves. And redemption is my word. It's not the word he says it, I think, much more eloquently than that. But just kind of how Eärendil's story sort of, is kind of a freedom for the Silmarils themselves. Kind of like what we talked about with Maglor's statement. Just seeing a Silmaril in the sky, it's all this the greedy possessiveness that's wrought so much harm in the world, and they're now free from it. They're now out of reach.
Yeah,
they're out of reach. They're out of harm's way. Yeah, exactly. It's such a great insight by Tom, and I would recommend that everyone listening should go and check that out at alasnotme.blogspot.com.
And we'll put that,
which is Tom's blog, and I'll put that link up on our show notes. Yeah, and please do go check that out, because it really does kind of help you see how the Silmarils are a microcosm of this larger eucatastrophe.
Absolutely.
And I guess we're getting kind of close to the end here. I really wanted to just kind of close this out with another listener comment, and this one comes to us from Stefan in the Netherlands. We actually got this comment from Stefan back after our Tolkien Reading Day episode. If you remember, Alan, we talked about Bilbo's poem about Eärendil, and we talked about that word flamifer at the end.
Yeah, we even talked about that again today, huh? When we were talking about
that's right, we did. Wow,
yeah.
It's been a long recording.
Long recording.
But we talked about the fact that maybe Tolkien coined that word flamifer because the original Latin name for the morning star, Lucifer, is a word that has very negative connotations for anybody with any knowledge of Christian tradition. And you could say, I guess, sort of the exact opposite of the inspirations for the character of Eärendil when he talked about the priest. But Stefan actually wrote to us to say, so he's in the Netherlands. Yeah. He said, you might be interested to know that in the Netherlands, we call a match a Lucifer.
Oh, interesting.
So for me, the word Lucifer doesn't really have that negative connotation, except when you burn the house down using a match. That would be bad. But then you can at least blame the devil.
Oh.
And I think reading that, I thought to myself, I bet that's exactly the excuse Feanor gave to Mandos about the ships at Losgard.
Oh man!
Thank you, Stefan, for that.
Thank you. That was a well-needed laugh, much-needed laugh. Well, folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, we really do thank you for joining us, and we have something special to announce. We've already let it out, but we're going to announce it again. Be sure to join us again in 1 week when we are honored to be welcoming John Garth to the podcast. He's the author of Tolkien and the Great War, as well as a shorter biographical work, Tolkien at Exeter College, as well as a number of articles about Tolkien in print and online. And I believe he just won the 2017 Tolkien Society Award for Outstanding Contribution.
That's right, he did. And I'm so looking forward to that. I think that might actually very well top discussing Eärendil for 2 hours and 20-something minutes. We're very excited to have him joining us, and I know it's going to be something that we'll enjoy, and I think you'll all enjoy it as well. If you haven't picked up Tolkien and the Great War yet, please do. It's a fantastic read, and we'll have some links to it on our website.
Yeah, and if you have, you should also consider ordering a copy of Tolkien at Exeter College, which you can do directly from John Garth's website at www.johngarth.co.uk. And again, we'll put that link up in our show notes. Shawn and I have both, and we plan to be asking about both works.
Yep, absolutely. And then 1 week after that, we'll come back to the Silmarillion, and we'll finally reach the Second Age when we dive into the first half of the Akalabaith.
That's the story of Numenor for all you first-time readers. So if you've been wondering about that place ever since you first heard the name Aragorn, son of Arathorn, You're finally about to get some answers.
Finally.
Yeah, the good news is it picks up right where this story leaves off, though we're not going to spoil how. But if you haven't read it before, don't worry. We're not going to take you too far afield just yet. It will all make sense, I promise.
Yes, and as I said, this next episode will just cover the first half. So we're going to go up to the passage on page 270 of our edition that ends with, "He himself set sail with his host into the east."
I don't know, Shawn. That's not foreboding enough, really. Maybe we should...
Not at all.
Okay.
Nothing bad ever comes from the east. Remember, if you're reading along and like to take notes as much as we do, don't mark up your first edition hardcovers. Go to the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where you can find links to cheap paperbacks of Tolkien's works, as well as audiobooks, music CDs, and some other cool things for your Tolkien collection. Mm-hmm. And if you buy through those links, you'll be helping to support this show without costing you a penny more.
We appreciate that. And you can also support us by leaving a review on iTunes. Even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, you can still leave us a review. It just takes a few minutes and an Apple ID. Some of you have said some really wonderful things on there, and we humbly thank you.
We do. And if you haven't done so already, you may subscribe on iTunes or through your favorite podcast app. You can find our RSS feed on our website, or you can search for us on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and most other podcast directories.
Yeah, and you know what? Subscribing on iTunes does help us a little bit because we're trying to figure out that crazy algorithm. Apple won't tell us anything. So if you can subscribe to us there, we'd appreciate that. But a big thank you to those of you who are connecting with us on social media. We set out to start a conversation that everyone could join, and that's why we call this The Prancing Pony. And it's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media is a great place to share the podcast as well. So please retweet us, share us, tell your friends, and thank you to those of you who are doing it.
Indeed. And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or selfies with your favorite star. And no, Elijah Wood and Orlando Bloom don't count. To the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll try to get him into our next episode. Well, oh my, 3 hours and something? 2 hours, sorry. 2 hours and 20 minutes. Definitely far, far too short a time to spend among such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.